directly above us in the standings. A chance to really make a statement, and that's the way we're looking at it. We're really excited. I think you could tell in the desperation and the way we played last game, just not giving up much. I know we didn't get as many chances, and kind of the offense wasn't as good, but that's what happens when you're playing desperate hockey.
I do find our grit for 60 minutes has been the biggest challenge, and that's normal, and that's the reason why we have been inconsistent. And we're going to have to increase our grit even tomorrow night to be able to beat them 2 times in a row.
Those voices you just heard were Robert Thomas this morning on TMA and Jim Montgomery, head coach of your St. Louis Blues. Yesterday, he joined the Fast Lane. He's going to join them weekly now. Robert Thomas, of course, on Weekly with TMA, alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, who's back in the studio with us today. I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So here's the question, Alex. Where do things stand as of today for the St. Louis Blues going into the game tonight? We know that this is a borderline must-win. You could make an argument that it is the most important game of the regular season to this point that they have been able to play. They're going with Joel Hofer in net. We'll get to that here in just a moment. They are making another change in the lineup as well. Sounds like it is likely that Joseph will be in and Texier will be coming out. There's also a question you said about
Texier's going in, Texier's coming out, Bolduc's going in.
Right.
And Joseph's staying in.
Texier's, I think that's what I said, right?
You said Joseph was coming in.
Yeah, you said Joseph coming out.
Joseph is in. I apologize. Texier coming out. Bolduc is going to be in. Mm-hmm. And there's a question on whether or not Jake Neighbors will be available due to health.
Yeah.
Alex, set the scene for us. What's the importance of this game? How are you approaching this one as a fan?
This is everything. This is somewhat the season for the Blues. I'm sure there will be people that can convince themselves if you take 1 point in this tonight and it's like, hey, you took 3 of 4, it's a tough setup. No, I'm not there. You need 4 points. And if it comes in overtime, good. It needs to come in regulation, in my opinion. You need to close the gap with some teams. You pick up 2 points tonight, and I don't know if Vancouver's in action, but you pick up 2 points tonight. They are in action tonight. And Vancouver plays the LA Kings. My guess is probably a loss for how Days of Our Lives Vancouver edition has been going.
Yes.
You pick up 2 points. You are now 1 point behind the Calgary Flames for that bottom wild card spot. You're 3 points ahead of the Utah Hockey Club, depending on what happens in their game. Depending on what happens with Vancouver, you're in a tie with them. You have closed the gap in terms of the teams that you're fighting with for that bottom wild card spot. Now let's play the opposite of this one. Let's jump to the other side of the fence. You lose this in regulation. You lay an egg, and what the players are saying is one of the most important games of the season for them. Calgary is now at 51 points with 2 games in hand. You are 5 points behind them. 5 points behind with 2 games in hand. Quick math, that's a 9-point difference right there. Boys, I don't know if you know this, but since Jim Montgomery took over, they have only really made up about 2 or 4 points worth jumping over teams in the standings. You aren't making up 9 points of a difference for a wild card spot. This right here is the opportunity to make the statement in the Western Conference, we could be the team that is going to go on the run for that final spot.
Yeah, and tonight is really the first game that I think you get to really say, hey, let's see how this team plays playoff-style hockey.
I thought the other night was.
To an extent, but Calgary's coming off a back-to-back,
Sure.
And that's why I would say tonight's more of that game because Calgary's had a day off. They've stayed in town. They've had a chance to really scout just the St. Louis Blues, unlike when they had to prepare for Chicago and St. Louis. So tonight is the one for me of, okay, this is kind of the real playoff game. I agree that game on whatever that was, Tuesday, was playoff-style hockey. Well, now we'll see if the Blues can adjust to it and continue to adjust with what the Flames are going to throw at them tonight. But Alex is right. This one is huge because of the 4-point swing that is involved in it. You really need to get these 2 points and really cut this gap down to 1, especially since they have 2 games in hand. And I like what you did there where you kind of just you have to assume they're going to get 4 points in those 2 games that they have in hand. They've got to find a way to win this one tonight and show up in an important fashion as well.
And I was also going to add, copy-paste what I said for Saturday's game because I think Saturday's game is just in the same importance level, even if you win this game tonight against Calgary.
Somebody on the text line, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You guys can check us out on YouTube as well at youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. From the 636, saying it's the season for the Blues with half of the season remaining is crazy to me. Even if they lose tonight, they're still in it. So I think it's a pass-fail test. Alex, you said you don't care, or you care a little bit they win it in regulation versus in overtime. The next 2 games, to me, I think I'm putting into a bundle because they already passed their first test. T-Bone, you said this is more playoff hockey than the first one, whatever. However we want to slice and dice it, these 3 games were critical given where they land on the schedule and who you're facing against. 2 against Calgary, 1 against Utah. To me, you needed 5 points in those, 5 out of the 6 points in those 3 games. Well, you got the 2. You've banked those. However they happened, whether it was a fun game to watch, whatever, they got the 2 points. 3 more. 3 more in the next 2 games. If that means 1 tonight and 2 on Saturday, so be it. I'd prefer the 2 to come tonight because Calgary is the team that you're trying to compete against. And if you get 2, especially if they don't get into overtime, like you get the 2 points and that's a 4-point swing in the standings between you and Calgary. So that's the ideal scenario here. But over the next 2 games, to me, you got to get at least 3 points. That's how I'm viewing this thing because it eventually becomes a math problem. And I know we all hate math around here, but you got to get yourself to 95-ish points given where the Western Conference is this year. You're battling for 1 spot.
Yeah.
These are 2 teams that you're going up against. 3 points, next 2 games. That's my criteria for them, and I don't care how it happens. It can be 1-0. It can be 7-5. Yeah. These next 2 games are a pass-fail test for me.
Yeah, well, and I agree with your statement. I just think that the 2 points have to come against this Calgary Flames team, and then the 1 can happen against Utah because of where they're at. Let me put this into a little bit of better context for people. The texter that said you guys are being a little exaggerating by saying that this is the season. Go back to when Jim Montgomery was hired. The Blues were 5 points behind that bottom wild card spot. They went 11-8-1 in their next 20 games. That's what? This is why you said you don't like math. 24 points out of the 40 possible in front of you. Fast forward to where you're at now. You are 3 points behind that bottom wild card spot with still 2 teams to leapfrog over. Like, you went on a run. Now, it wasn't great, but you went on a run where you were a little bit above 500. And you barely made up ground. You made up 2 points ground of getting to that wild card spot. Now, put yourself back into the position where you're 5 points out if you lose this game to Calgary. And with, yes, I know it's almost half a season to go, but go ahead and look at the schedule the rest of the way. It's no longer Calgary's and Vancouver's and Columbus's. It's Vegas and Colorado's and Dallas's.
I also disagree with the notion that there's half a season to go. That's not what the Blues are playing for right now. It's not about what happens post-trade deadline. It's about what happens prior to that. And really, it's about what happens prior to the Four Nations face-off. So you have effectively 2.5 weeks left.
Yeah.
That the Blues season will very likely come down to what they do prior to February 8th. And that means when you look at who you're going up against in this stretch of games, like you got a couple of games against Utah, huge, massive games. Those are a huge swing in the standings potentially for the Western Conference wildcard spot. You got a game coming up tonight against Calgary. You got another one against Vancouver. These are the games that I would have circled. Now, all of them are important, don't get me wrong, because once you win one, the next one is the most important for you. Right. But for the Blues, they are trying to force the hand of Doug Armstrong. There was a report earlier today that Alex mentioned while we were prepping for the show, Taylor Hall potentially prepping for a possibility of him getting traded at the deadline. Hey, that's a guy that I would circle if I was a Blues fan because he can help you on the power play. We've talked before about Granlund. We've talked about all of these different dudes that can be available at the deadline. None of that matters if the Blues lose the next 2 games. Because if the Blues lose these games, there is nothing in there that would suggest to Doug Armstrong, I need to fortify this team. He lacks draft pick capital going into next year's draft. He has a bunch of prospects that he really likes, but he would like to hold on to them for the offseason or for the future unless they force his hand. In which case, he will very likely, because we know how Army operates, go out there and make the move that is necessary. So to me, yes, there is a lot of season left to be played, but there is not a lot of season left to be played prior to the deadline, and certainly prior to the week leading up to the deadline, which is when Army makes his moves. So I disagree with the notion that you're talking about 37 games left. Dude. There's like 15 games left that really matter for this team to dictate what Doug Armstrong does prior to the deadline.
Can I give you guys a little bit of news? You mentioned earlier that Texier coming out of the lineup, Bolduc coming in. According to Matt DeFranks, Brandon Saad was skating with the extras after practice. So if this is going to play to where Jake Neighbors is able to go, which he's questionable, it looks like Brandon Saad's going to be coming out of the game as well, and Nathan Walker's going to be going in on that third line. Wow. So that third line will be at least if I'm assuming this correct, Nathan Walker with Oscar Sundquist and Zach Bolduc, and Brandon Saad and Alex Texier will come out of the lineup.
I like it.
I love it. I want some more of it.
I thought there was also a really great quote. We're going to break this down a little bit further later on in the afternoon today, but one of my favorite things that I've seen so far from Jim Montgomery was a quote that he said earlier today. He said this to the assembled media on whether or not the Blues should keep the lineup the same. Quote, "No, our team is not at the level where we keep the same lineup. Our lack of consistency when we have success, it's just going to be based on if guys are doing the right things out there. If you play well, you continue to play, win or lose," end quote. I love when actions speak, or actions are followed up with the words. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you'll hear these coaches say something, and then you see the actions, and you're like, what you said meant nothing if you don't actually follow that up with the actions that are according to those words. Monty is following it. I thought Matthew Joseph had a good game the other night.
I did too.
So guess what? Hey, Matthew Joseph, you earned the right to go back out there in the lineup tonight. You know who didn't have a very good game? Brandon Saad. You know who else I didn't think had a very good game was Alexander Texier. And those guys are potentially coming out of the lineup.
Gave that away.
Credit where it's due. Jim Montgomery, this is part of why they hired him. This is a guy that communicates really well with his team. He's communicating through the media right now. His expectations have been set in a specific spot. And for those players that aren't meeting those expectations, they're coming out of the lineup.
Yep. He knows what this team needs to get to the playoffs. And Jim Montgomery, and my assumption is his goal was when he was brought on here was be a team that competes for a playoff spot, and he's not BSing around. If you don't play well, you're coming out of the lineup. He's done this with Bolduc, he's done it with Joseph, he's done it with Brandon Saad, and he's doing it once again. And I think that sends the proper message to the team when you've got this mentality of, hey, this is a do or die for us, and if the coach is still leaving in guys that are inexperienced or aren't making the right plays to help the team win, then the team's looking around being like, yeah, but are we? And they basically took Nathan Walker, a guy that everybody in that locker room loves, that works harder than anyone else on that ice, out of the game on Tuesday in a huge game. And I'm sure the players around were like, wait, what? This guy's out here giving it his all every single game. And you know what they said? Said, nope, that third line wasn't good enough. Nathan Walker, who works his ass off, you're going right back in. That's the message you need to send to your team.
All right, last thing here before we get out, Alex. Blues back in action this evening against the Calgary Flames. Pre-game with Alex starts at 6 o'clock. Puck drop for a big one right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN at 7. And when that puck is dropped, it will be, according to the Blues, Joel Hofer, who is in net for this one. My guess is they're sticking to their schedule. 2 games in a row for Jordan Binnington. Now they're going to go with the 1 for Hofer. You likely see Jordan Binnington on the road at Utah. Alex, what do you make of this decision?
I mean, I could have made an argument for either. I think my side leaded more towards Jordan Binnington getting this start because this is a playoff-like atmosphere. And what's Jordan Binnington great at? Performing in playoff-like atmospheres. But they're sticking to the 2-1. They don't want to wear out Jordan Binnington. They don't want him to get fatigued, especially after the Four Nations tournament, for how many games they play in a little amount of time. And look, Joel Hofer, whether you believe in it or not, Joel Hofer has been really good on home ice. He hasn't been good on the road. So the 2-1 actually works in the favor. And this actually plays well because Calgary, probably thinking it's going to be Jordan Binnington, now they got to prep for a different goaltender.
Yeah, I didn't like it. I'd rather go with Jordan Binnington tonight because, one, I do agree with what you said. Playoff type game. I know Binnington's going to perform in those. 2, he's coming off a really good game against the Calgary Flames back on Tuesday when he gave up 1 goal. And 3, I would want to go with my best goalie in the game in which I'm chasing a team with the 4-point swing than the team that's behind me in Utah. I would have rather gone with Binnington tonight. I know it's not with the 2-1 schedule. I think those schedules need to be amended at times, especially when there's this important of a game at this point in the season. I would have gone with Binnington tonight and then gone to Hofer on Saturday at Utah.
My guess, Alex, and you've mentioned this, I think sometimes we make too much of it, but regardless, my guess is some of this is, hey, the next 2 games are on the road, and Binnington has been better on the road than he has been at home. Again, I think a lot of that is small sample size. He gave up 8 goals at home, so yes, his numbers at home look worse than they do on the road accordingly. But they've got 2 games coming up, both of them big, Utah, Vegas. Maybe they're going to go with him in those 2 games, Hofer in this one, and then they come back home again next Thursday. After a little bit of a layoff, go to Hofer in that one, and then boom, back to Dallas and Vancouver with Jordan Binnington.
Yep.
That would be my assumption on this. I don't know how their schedule will lay out, but I'm guessing they are going to stick with this 2-1.
Well, and I think some of this, too, is just going into the game planning on the Calgary side. Like, Calgary's only seen Joel Hofer once, and it was 2 years ago, I believe, and he picked up a shutout against them. So they don't have a whole lot of film against Joel Hofer versus Jordan Binnington, who they see an awful lot from.
And they've seen him twice this year.
Yep. And so you go with the wild card. I mean, Calgary's doing the same thing. My expectation is Dustin Wolf's going to be in for them. They're not going to go with their same goaltender. So you just get different looks. And I don't mind the decision, but hindsight is 2020, and I wonder if you don't win this one, you look back and be like, damn, you should have played Benner.
With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You guys can always check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. In 15 minutes, we're catching up with our friend, the Blues analyst for 101 ESPN and FanDuel Sports Midwest. He is, of course, Joey Vitale. But next, a Cardinals was named a top 10 player at his position last night based on MLB Network's rankings. How many other Cardinals have the case to be top 7, top 10 at their respective positions right now? We'll tell you next year on 101 ESPN.
It's Nolan Arenado of the St. Louis Cardinals. Arenado is a stalwart at the position. This is his 11th straight year in the top 10. 11. He is 2 years removed from a great season, but he slid back last year, finishing just about league average in hitting. His defensive metrics remain solid, but a lot of questions for a great player as he hits 34.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, that's what it sounded like yesterday on MLB Network as they ranked Nolan Arenado as the seventh best third baseman in Major League Baseball. Alex, it feels about right. I think you could argue that he probably should be eighth. I said during our show that feels pretty high to me. And then you look at the names on the list behind him. It's Max Muncy, who I would flip. I would put Muncy ahead of Arenado, and it seems pretty clear that the Dodgers agree with that sentiment.
What?
And then it's Paredes and Eugenio Suarez at the back end of the top 10. It's like, okay, maybe there just aren't a ton of great third basemen in Major League Baseball right now. The top of the list is amazing. Ramirez, Devers, Bregman, Machado, Austin Riley. Okay, all of those guys deserve to be in the top five. But then there's a teardrop, and I don't think there's worth an argument otherwise. But it did make me think. So the Cardinals have a top 7 player at their position right now. It's Nolan Arenado. And they're trying like crazy to get him off of the roster as soon as humanly possible. Begs the question, Alex, other than Ryan Helsley, who there's also been trade discussions about, by the way, do the Cardinals have anybody else that as of today you would project to be top 7 to 10 at their position for the 2025 season?
The only other guy that I can come up with is your first baseman. And the pushback would be, yeah, but his defense isn't going to look good. And
Who's your first baseman?
Wilson Contreras, man.
Okay, just making sure we're all on the same
Who's your first
page.
baseman?
Who do you guys think will start the most games at first base for the Cardinals in 2025?
Wilson Contreras.
Oh, that's a good question, because I could see where they do the classic Cardinals. Whoa, he's not a first baseman.
What, after one game when Mason Wynn wails
Is
one
it going
past
to
him?
shock you if it's Alec Burleson?
It would shock me because I think they're going to try and make the Wilson Contreras thing work as long as possible.
I think so too, but like it will not shock me.
Yeah,
I could
and
see
not going
Contreras
back
being
to-
a full-time DH.
That's the other thing. He's not going back to catcher. It's either first base or
agreed.
DH. And I think it's going to be interchanging with Burleson. And if Arenado's gone, I think he's your everyday first baseman.
I think there's a path where even if Arenado's gone, I could see where Burleson beats him.
agree.
I don't think it'd be by a lot, but I could see like 2 months in, they're like, whoa, this is like the Jose Martinez experience at first again. Let's just make him a DH now. So I could see where Burley ends up becoming a first baseman. That's why, like, I kind of agree with you. I think he's going to be a top 7 offensive
His bat will
producing
definitely be it.
first baseman. I just don't know what he's going to look like defensively. I still think he would have been a top 7 catcher in baseball, but, we can't do that.
But let's go down the hypothetical path together because Alex is the most optimistic about the Cardinals of anybody in this damn room. Let's say he's average defensively. He's top 7 at a first baseman.
Can we? Let's go down this list together real quick. So Vlad Guerrero, you'd probably have him above Wilson Contreras, right?
Yeah.
Bryce Harper,
Yeah.
Freddie Freeman,
Yeah.
Salvador Perez.
Is he a first baseman?
He plays over there a decent amount now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought he was DH, but if he's first baseman, then yes.
Christian Walker,
Yeah. He's Gold Glove, 30 homers.
Matt Olson. Last year, Matt
his
Olson
glove-
finished about 15% above league average, hit 30 home runs.
I think Wilson Contreras could have hit 30 home runs. The Gold Glove is where you fall short.
Yeah, so I guess Olsen will be ahead of him.
Pete
Defense.
Alonso,
Yeah, Alonso.
Ryan Mountcastle. I think that's probably a pretty
I'd
close
probably
one.
put Wilson
Yeah.
Contreras above him.
It'd be close.
You're looking at the back of Luis Ariz.
I'd have Wilson Contreras.
I'd go Contreras above.
Okay, you're looking at like 9, 10, kind of in that range is probably what you're looking at for Wilson Contreras. And then we'll see what happens with Carlos Santana. He had this crazy bounce back year last year. I don't think that's who he is. I would rather have Wilson Contreras. And
we know about crazy bounce backs in the Cardinals.
you're also looking for, hey, can Contreras play first base? Because as of right now, we don't know that. We're not entirely sure. He can play it in a pinch for sure. Is he an everyday first baseman defensively? We've seen what that looks like with Jose Martinez, where at times you think a guy can do it, and then you put him over there, and it totally ruins your infield defense.
Yeah.
So we'll see what ends up happening with him at first. But I'm with you, Alex. I think you can make a pretty strong case for it. You guys know I'm going to make the case for Mason Wynn. I think Mason Wynn will, by the end of the season, be viewed as a top 10 shortstop in Major League Baseball, and that's just because, Dansby Swanson. Would you rather have Dansby Swanson or Mason Wynn? I'd rather have Mason Wynn.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be wild, though, because Mason Wynn's hope on that is going to be his first baseman being good. Because
part
how
of it,
many
for
errors
sure.
are going to be coming into this if Mason Wynn's heaving those 100-mile-an-hour balls from shortstop and Contreras isn't catching them?
It is a high bar to clear at the position right now.
Yeah.
Witt, Henderson, Lindor, Ellie De La Cruz, Adames, Seager, Mookie, depending on what happens, what do the Dodgers end up doing at shortstop this year, but you could kind of throw him at the position, and then Trey Turner. Like, that's 7 or 8 names, depending on what happens with Mookie, that are just amazing shortstops right now in Major League Baseball that all hit probably a little better than what you're anticipating for Mason Wynn. So if he's going to make this list, it is probably like Contreras, where you're talking about at the back half and probably the bottom 3 out of that top 10. Would you guys have anybody else that you'd throw into this conversation? Top 10 at their position by the end of the 2025 season. I would say Newt is one that you could watch. I know people are going to push back on it. You look at the left field production in Major League Baseball, it just ain't that great.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but if Nolan Gorman is this power bat that T-Bone's talking about, that's a top 10 second baseman, top 7 second baseman.
Or you could just fill the spot that Nolan Arenado was at 3rd.
Yeah.
With him.
Very true.
Sure.
Like, have Muncy at 8, put him at 9, boom.
That's
ready to
only
go.
if this guy's a 30 home run hitter. If you're 20 home runs and you're striking out like crazy, then that's not even in the
I
cards.
guess to that point, Brendan Donovan is a top 10 second baseman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
If you put him there and keep him there, I would agree with that
I mean,
one.
I was just looking at second baseman WAR, and he finished
Damn, look at this, boys.
5th at
Top 10 at
3.2.
all.
Wow,
Of the
we are
5
going to be awesome
infield
this year.
positions.
What am I
Cardinals are
going
gonna
to
be
be
great.
spending money?
It's amazing how like
No
nobody in
wonder
the,
they're building around the youth. Let's
Yeah.
go.
it's amazing
We
how
don't need to
nobody.
spend a dime. We're so good.
The outfield is going to be brutal.
It'll be great. Newt will be top 10 in left field.
Yeah, Walker will be top 10.
Are we
Newt will be top 10
are
in
we
left field.
isolating Newt? Are we just taking all the outfielders to 60 games? Because if we are, then I'd agree with that.
I will be ready to make a case for
Michael
Ivan
Ciani.
Herrera as a top 10 catcher by the end of the year, I bet.
Well, that'll be funny when he's not playing that position.
Yeah, that'll
Yeah,
be
I
great.
was gonna say, you mean top 10 DH?
Yeah, you want to go with Pedro Pais as a
He'll
top
be
10
at
catcher?
DH. Wilson Contreras will be in left field. We'll have Newton center, and it's just going to be a
You'll have a
wild
top
ride.
10 closer in the game.
Till we trade him.
This Cardinals team, boys.
He's Alex
90
Esteban. I'm
wins.
BK. We're talking to
Yeah, top 30
the one
starter.
and only Joey Vitale next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Erickson here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tonight as they host the Calgary Flames. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 7. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. Huge game tonight for the St. Louis Blues at home against the Calgary Flames in this back-to-back setting. I kind of enjoy this. Normally, it's a little annoying to get the back-to-back games against the same team. Not right now, because the Blues are trying to catch the Calgary Flames in the standings, and they will be taking each other on once again tonight. Blues won game 1 tonight. Blues versus Calgary, 7 o'clock puck drop. And on the call for that game will be Joey Vitale. He's the Blues analyst for 101 ESPN and FanDuel Sports Midwest. He joins us weekly here on BK and Ferrario via the Callier and Thompson hotline. Joe, we appreciate the time as always, man. How you doing today?
Joey! Thank God it's not the Arizona Coyotes.
Yeah, exactly. It's 2 in a row, but it's not 7 during that COVID time against those Coyotes. That was a fun time to be alive.
I've never wanted a team to leave St. Louis faster than that 5th time they played Arizona when our pregame was like, Joe, what am I supposed to say anymore? Arizona's beating the Blues' butts. I'm sick of seeing Nick Schmaltz and Clayton Keller. Can we please move on?
It was a struggle. I'm not gonna lie. And the fact I don't know how did we end up how did that series end? I don't think we did very well.
No, I think we only won like 2 games out of it.
Oh, it went horribly for the Blues.
2 out of 5. Yeah, that ain't gonna cut it. But I guess the Coyotes loved being in St. Louis for 2 straight weeks and not being in Arizona in the middle of winter. But that was a long time. This isn't quite like it, but a back-to-back, a rare back-to-back. But I will say, guys, I don't think this has happened since 2022 where you have the same team on home ice back-to-back times. It's going to happen later this month with the Vegas Golden Knights, but keep in mind that's a home-to-home. So it is a rare situation. But if there was one team that's going to keep it exciting and keep this fan base and, of course, the broadcasters and players engaged, it's going to be this Calgary team. So it's a great opponent to do this with, especially this time of the year, because that's the team you're chasing.
It sounds like there's going to be some potential lineup changes for the Blues tonight, Joey. Bolduc potentially in for Texier, and if you believe what the extra skaters were after practice today, Saad potentially out, Nathan Walker potentially in, and then Joel Hofer, of course, in net tonight as well. What do you make of the changes that Monty is making ahead of tonight's game?
I think it shows that it's a coach that doesn't really care about the result. A lot of times coaches live under this realm of you win, you keep the lineup the exact same. I never really liked that. To me, it's always, performance-based and result-based, and I've never really liked it. And you have Jim Montgomery, who's coming in now and saying, yeah, we won. Yeah, it was a great game, but I think we could be better. So I appreciate the fact that he's switching things up after a win. I think it just goes to show you, like what he said this morning at the press conference, that there's still some inconsistencies in their game. When there's inconsistencies, you keep moving players around till you find the right chemistry. So I really applaud Montgomery for doing this. I do think Bolduc is going to draw in for Texier. That is a lock. A couple things up in the air with Jake Neighbors, who was skating this morning. He's kind of nursing an upper body injury. So we're going to have to kind of maybe wait till game time decision to kind of figure out what's going on there. Is Saad going to be in? Is Nathan Walker going to draw back in? I think right now Nathan Walker seems to be the odd man out. But depending on how Neighbors is doing and what they decide to do with Brandon Saad, he could draw right back in. But a young player who clearly was fired up in the morning skate 2 days ago when I talked to Nathan, asking him if he was doing okay, if he's hurt or anything. He said, no, he's feeling good. He just wants to get right back in that lineup, and he has some fire in his eyes. So if I'm Jim Montgomery, if you're holding him out another night tonight, you're looking to get him back in here pretty soon because he's going to bring the heat.
Joe, that game, the first one against Calgary, the third line, that Saad, Sundqvist, Texier, they were on the ice. I think they took 2 shifts, and after Calgary scored the game-tying goal, they didn't see the ice for the rest of that game. If it goes the way that it seems like, to where Walker and Bolduc are going to be jumping in, what's Jim Montgomery wanting from that third line?
Well, obviously, number one, you have to make sure that you establish yourself that you do the non-negotiables well. And there's a couple hard non-negotiables if you're a bottom 6 group. I was playing with Aaron Asham. I think I've told you this before, Alex, in the past. Aaron Asham, of course, a lifer on the fourth line, fighter, one of the toughest guys I ever played with. He had some 2-3-minute bouts with Cam Janssen. They definitely went the distance a couple of times, but a player that understood his role as a fighter, being physical. And he stayed in the league a long time, not just because of his toughness, but because he managed the game well. And, he told me a few things. He said, as a fourth liner, Joe, there's three things we don't do. And I think you can make the argument for a third line now, especially with the group like an Oscar Sundqvist and Nathan Walker, because those could be fourth liners on any given team that's really, really good. So bottom six, he said, there's three things we don't do. So we don't get scored on, we don't take penalties, and we don't step offside. And I remember saying to him in my head, I said, yeah, I get the not scored on. I get don't take penalties. You can't do that either. Those are non-negotiables. I didn't really quite get the offside one. And then it was in that very next night, we're playing in a game. We're out there for about 15 seconds. I think I step offside. He tries to carry the puck in the zone. There's a whistle, and, of course, our coach changes this up. So I learned pretty quickly that that's why you don't step offside, because you're going to get yanked off the ice pretty quickly. It just gives the coach the green light, of course, to take you off, and you had your 15, 20 seconds of fun. Let's go put some star players out there again. So I bring that up because you asked the question, what do you need to do? Well, it's not just what you need to do, what you have to avoid. Obviously, getting scored on late in the game is not something that the bottom six can really do. You have your high-power offensive guys, the top six guys, the Neighbors, the Thomases, the Kyrus. If they get scored on, you're kind of okay with that because they're generating a lot of chances. But if you're a group that prides themselves on being defensive first hockey, you got to be dependable. You have to be able to go out there as a tight game like it was the other night and do a job. And of course, they didn't do the job that needed to be done. A couple turnovers there that led ultimately to that ball goal that ended up tying the game. So that to me is what you got to see if you're Jim Montgomery looking at the bottom six.
We're talking to Joey Vitale for just another couple of minutes here on 101 ESPN. Joe, I thought an open-ended question on which goalie would start tonight, whether it was Hofer or if they would go with Bennington. Were you surprised at all that they decided to go with Joel Hofer in this one?
Well, no, because I asked Hof on Tuesday who was playing. He said he would. So,
so you knew what was coming.
I did personally, but that was just for me and Joel. And I just flat out asked them. And sometimes these guys are really great. They respect what I do. They understand that I have a job to do, and I try to keep that kind of stuff quiet. Other times they're very open about it. But, yeah, he just flat out came out and told me, he goes, I'm going Thursday. And that's always the plan. Now, the plans can always change. If Bennington comes in and steals the show and gets a shutout and he really, just blanks the Calgary Flames, maybe they switch it back up. But I think Jim is really, really strict about this rotation. He likes this rotation. We've talked about it a lot, but you're going to need Bennington here in the next 6 weeks especially. Obviously, you're not just resting with the Four Nations. What's more important to the Blues team is that he's playing lights-out hockey in January and February during this stretch. He's been known, of course, like most goalies, is because he's human, that if you overuse him, overwork him too much, you play him in 3 straight over a week span and let Joe Hofer just sit there. Over time, that can wear on his legs there a little bit, and his play starts to show and starts to get a little sluggish. So what they're trying to do is stay proactive with it. You get Joe Hofer in there, you keep the rotation, you make sure that the goalies not only are getting rest, BK, but you also want them to know when the rest is coming. That's the other thing too, right? It's not like a decision this morning saying where Bennington was playing all the last 2 days. Joe Hofer and him come to the rink today, and then they find out, Hofer's going tonight. Okay, I just spent the last 2 days preparing. It's nothing like that. This is why being proactive and coming up with a plan, it's really important for us humans to know what's coming. And I use the analogy where if a basketball team in high school, they drop a bad game on Friday night and they lose. The next practice, the coach just says, line up on the what's the goal line called? And falls at the court? I don't know.
Baseline.
Baseline, of course, the baseline. Get on the baseline. Boop, he blows the whistle, right? And he just says mountains, and he starts blowing. By the 6th, 7th mountain, if he just keeps blowing, you're going to be just so sluggish and so dead. But as soon as that coach says, all right, boys, we got 2 more, or all right, boys, we got 1 more, what happens, right? All of a sudden they find that energy. Why? Because they know the end's in sight. They see the end, and they know what to expect now. It's in the human psyche that we love to know what to expect. We love to see the plan and know what's coming. So I think that's where the plan is the plan for these goalies. And Jim Montgomery has established a plan, and he lets them know ahead of time so we know that, hey, this is when I need you really good, and this is when I need you to take a little bit of a break because you need that too.
Joe, final one for me. We got a little pushback earlier in the show when BK and I said, like, this game tonight really feels like the season for the Blues in terms of the decisions that'll be made at the trade deadline. From your perspective, what's most important? Is it 2 points? Is it getting at least a point in this game? Or is it a regulation win?
And I would add the next game against Utah to that list, Joe. It's kind of a combination of these 3 games in a row for me.
Well, first of all, what does a pushback look like if you're on the radio doing a show? Are people like
they call us names?
Oh, like the
Joe, have you seen this text line before?
They're
have you ever
brutal.
opened it up?
Stay away from it. I stay away from it.
Yeah.
They're brutal. It's like Curbs calling me man boobs, but like multiplied by 1,000.
That's actually a compliment on this text line.
Truth.
Yeah, that was a good night. You know what? Is it their season? Well, no, it's not their season clearly, but is it a big game, guys? Yeah, this is about as big as it gets up to this point in the season. I mean, obviously you're hoping to play some very meaningful hockey here in March. You know, I remember last year when the Blues went to visit the Nashville Predators. This is like a few weeks ago in the season, right before that LA-San Jose run. And I remember they were heading into that game, and they were like 3 or 4 points out. And Nashville was right there, too. And I remember analytically speaking, if the Blues won that game, they had like an 80% shot of getting in. If they lost, they went down to like 20. I mean, that's the importance of that game. Now, we're not quite there, but I think for January, I don't know if there's a more important game for any other team going on this week than it is right now for the St. Louis Blues. And, you know, guys, to be fair, for the Calgary Flames, too. They understand that they don't want to make this a race in March and April. They want to get ahead of this a little bit. They want to stay ahead of this a little bit, and that way they're not playing lifeline hockey come the end of April where they're scratching and clawing for every single point. They want to create that gap. They know they got a little bit of a cushion. They got a couple games in the Blues. Vancouver just a little bit ahead of the Blues as well. Look for both of those teams to understand where they're at and to not make this thing interesting. So just like the Blues, it's important. It's very important for the Calgary Flames here as well. But I do agree with you guys. I think this game is super important here tonight. I think, you know, aside from the points, the points are the points. You lose this game, you're right back down to 500. It is what it is. I think the psyche of this team, I think this team needs to get over a hump. I think they've been into this hump mentality the last couple seasons where you win 2, lose 2, win 3, lose 3. The ups and the downs, and they just keep staying at that 500 plateau. And I know that they're looking to psychologically get beyond that. And to me, this game tonight is more about the psychology of getting over that hump. You get over 2 games over 500, you win here tonight. But more importantly, you start stretching some games together that are really meaningful and teams you're chasing. So the importance of this game, it can't be underestimated here.
Be a good time to get a 3-game winning streak for the first time this year. That's for damn sure.
Take that.
Hey, Joe, appreciate the time as always, man. Looking forward to hearing you on the call tonight. Blues versus Flames, and your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN puck drop for that one with Joe and Curbs tonight at 7 o'clock. All the best, man. We'll talk with you again next week.
Sounds good, boys. Take care. Have a great week.
See you, Joey. As Joey Vitale, you'll hear him tonight on the call for the Blues versus the Calgary Flames. Alex Ferrario will have pregame for that one coming up at 6.
One thing I was just looking at as Joe was talking, like, because, you know, obviously people think we're being a little too...
I feel like that's a minority, though. I think most people agree. This is a huge game. Whether you agree with, like, the consequences of it or not all that important to me, honestly. The game is massive.
Yeah. In the month of March... Like, if you're trying to still make up ground and put a stretch together of a winning streak because you haven't up until that point, you open up the month of March playing 5 games in 8 days, and you end the month of March playing 9 games in 15 days. Think about that for a minute. Like, you were playing a majority of March in a span of 3.5 weeks. That is almost impossible to try and put together a 5, 6, 7 game win streak together. Can you put a point streak together in that stretch? Probably, but not a win streak. That's why you got to get a win streak when you got game day off with no back-to-backs.
Blues have 17 games between now and the NHL trade deadline. They have 7 of those after the Four Nations face-off. So you're talking about 10 games basically between now and that break. That break is probably going to be, I would imagine, could be wrong on this, when Doug Armstrong and his lieutenants will get together and say, where are we at, everybody? Like, let's take a reset. Let's self-scout for a minute. How do we feel about this team? And if this team goes into the break winning 7 of their next 10 games, they get points at least in 7 of their next 10 games, what do you think those discussions are going to be like? Hey, you know, I think we're hitting I think we're playing our best hockey at the right time. You know, we We feel like Benner can help us reach the mountaintop once again, and we've got a team that we really think is worthy of going out there and adding to. Now, if they lose these next couple of games, and let's say they get points in 4 of their next 10, it's going to be a very different discussion where it becomes really difficult to make the argument we should continue to invest in this club. And what ends up happening is those 2 weeks prior to the deadline, when you come back from this break, which there is literally 2 weeks between the start of that second half of the season, if you so to speak, and the deadline, that is when you start having those discussions with other teams of what your roster is going to look like and whether or not you're going to be a buyer or a seller. If the Blues struggle over these next 10 games, you're in the seller category most likely, or at least holding. If you play really well, suddenly you get into that group with the buyers. That is why I place so much importance on what happens, especially over these next 2 games, but over these next 10 overall. These 2 games are so important because of who you're going up against head-to-head and the swing that exists potentially within them. So, yeah, I mean, it's massive. Joey's right. We brought up the comparison the other day. It's last year's Nashville game. That's what this is. And last year they lost it. And you knew then and there, it just ain't going to work. Because there was that Columbus game right before the break where you're like, oh, if you're just going to limp into the break like this, you don't seem to care about these points when it's a gimme, I shouldn't care about it either. And then you were reassured of that once you got to that Nashville game. The Blues have had a couple of games recently where it's like, oh, that's the performance that you're going to have in this spot. If they follow that up by the reassurance in the next 2 games of, oh, okay, and then you had the big one and you let that one go as well, that will be a reminder of what they did last year. And it'll feel the exact same way afterwards.
Yep. And typically those meetings with the front office, if they feel like you're a good team, they ask the question, what's our weakness? If they think you're a bad team, they say, who can we get rid of? And that's the difference of those conversations that are going to take place after the Four Nations tournament.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone on BK. Questions and answers, 314-399-9646 is the Your Comfort Service text line, and that is coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in right now over on the Air Comfort Service text line or on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. All right, let's get into this one from the 314. Guys, if the Blues were to become sellers at the deadline, who do you think they would end up trading away? So this one to me it feels pretty simple.
Yeah, it's odd. I think there's others you can do. I think they would look at Radek Faksa. Depending on where Nick Leddy's at in his recovery and how he looks prior to that, I think he'll be at least considered for how much teams always want defensemen, especially somebody who could come in and be a second or third pair defenseman. I think those would be the three main ones that teams would be calling about.
Depending on what happens with Joseph, like if he plays really well the rest of this stretch prior to the deadline, maybe somebody calls you about him. Sonny, same thing. Maybe somebody calls you about him.
Matthew Joseph could potentially as well if he gets a little bit of string. That's a fourth line player that teams. Sure. Honestly, I wonder if teams would call about Nathan Walker.
I would.
Yeah.
Those are the
Ryan
kinds
Suter
of pieces.
too.
I don't think you're making a big move. Nobody in your top six, I don't think, would be available at the deadline. Suter, I could see them re-signing and saying, hey, we're not going to get anything of significance at return at the deadline. Let's just keep him around. He's a really good veteran presence. He's played well enough to be back next season. I would just bring him back next year on another incentive-laden deal, see what it looks like.
Especially with a lot of young defensemen who could be playing again for you next year.
I think that's kind of it. I don't think this is a team that has a lot to sell at the deadline. They are more of a advantageous sellers, and then in the offseason, that becomes where you become buyers again. So I think it's really Saad. Saad's the one guy to me that makes the most sense for them to sell at the deadline. All right, from the 314, Alex, do you think that Tyler Tucker is solidifying himself as a legitimate third-pair defenseman option for this team?
I think so. And Jim Montgomery actually was just talking about him today at practice, about the strides that he made. And he even said, Tyler Tucker, when Jim Montgomery first got there, it kind of felt like he wasn't sure what his role was with the team and how he could fit in, and kind of shy about his play. And he's like, that's completely changed. I mean, he's got 2 points in his last 3 games, but more importantly, he's playing 13 and a half, 16 minutes. He's hitting, he's getting into fights, he's blocking shots. Yeah, I mean, this is a prototypical third-pair defenseman, which is always good. You're either a 6th or a 7th defenseman, and he and Matt Kessel can jockey for those 2 positions.
You know what I will say about Tyler Tucker? Somebody that's watched the last few games, haven't noticed him a ton. That's a great thing for Tyler Tucker.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a great thing for him. I shouldn't notice him on the ice. And there were far too many times early in the season and then late last year as well where I noticed Tyler Tucker on the ice, and not necessarily for the good things that he does, which is that physical presence that you're talking about, Alex, the ability to go out there and occasionally, put up a point. His role is really to go out there and be a younger version of Ryan Suter.
Yeah.
Can you do that? And if you can, to like a 60% degree, dude, you can stay in the lineup. That's totally fine.
How about this one for you? And I know people don't like the plus minus, but for Tyler Tucker's sake, I think it's interesting because when you're a third pair defenseman, if you're not being noticed, it's a good thing.
And it's what Joey said, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're a fourth line player or a third pair defenseman, don't take bad penalties, don't be offsides, and don't get scored on. I would add one more, by the way, to that list.
Yeah.
I know he was with an NHL player. He certainly would know more.
Of course.
Maybe this is something that's been added to the list. Don't turn the puck over towards the middle of the ice in your own end. Because that is something that for this team, the bottom 6 guys have done way too much at times.
Tyler Tucker has not been a minus since Jim Montgomery has taken over.
Hasn't been a minus since his first game on the ice this year.
Yeah. And that was December 19th. But, and he's played consistently. Like, he has not come out of the lineup since December 27th against the Nashville Predators. Actually, the 23rd. So since Jim Montgomery took over, Tyler Tucker has not come out of the lineup, and he has been either neutral or a positive for this team on the defensive side.
Hey, man, credit to him. Yeah. I've said it a lot. I think people got way out over their skis on what Tyler Tucker was going to be long term. At one point, people were like, is he a top 4 defenseman? No. But that's okay. Yeah. Not everybody has to become a star in the league. You're going to need the connective tissue on a team. And for Tyler Tucker, that means being the 6th defenseman out of the 6 guys that get to play. That's a good thing. Nathan Walker, his role is to be the 12th or 13th forward on a good team. There's value in having that guy around and just not having to worry about it. There's value for the Cardinals and having a number 5 starter that's just never going to be more than that. He's just going to be a number 5 starter, and you don't have to worry about him anymore, and he's cost controlled. So,
I thought we were talking about Michaelis.
No.
Remember what
Tucker being that guy is a good thing for the Blues long term.
Remember what that third pair was in that Stanley Cup run back in 2019. It was Joel Edmondson and Carl Gunnarsson when they were playing Vince Dunn at the top. Like, Matt Kessel and Tyler Tucker are the prototypical third-pair defensemen for the Blues, which is a good thing to have.
I always thought that his ceiling, and I don't know if ceiling's the right word, but you always hope that he could serve what like Bortuzzo's role was here, right? Big physical presence defensively, not known as a puck mover, but a guy that's just perfect. Put him in the lineup, third pair, maybe even kill penalties at some point in his career as well.
Last thing that I've got for you guys. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. This one comes from the 314 as well. Are the Cardinals really going to make no transactions all winter long? And no, I personally don't count not signing Goldie or Kittredge as moves. Now, we would agree with you there. That doesn't count.
Yeah, that's the opposite of a move.
You got to make a trade or signing for a player that is on your roster to qualify as a transaction that matters for the Cardinals. I do not believe that will be the case. I think they will add something. And that may just be a Nolan Arenado trade. I don't know how much more beyond that they're potentially going to do, but I think they will make a move or two prior to the start of spring training games. So I don't think they're going to make no moves whatsoever this offseason. No.
I think you're going to see one move if it's not a trade, and my trade is probably on the pitching side of things, but I think you're going to see one move, and it's going to be a low-level arm that you put into the bullpen mix. That's the move.
Yeah, I think you'll see one or two trades, and the reason I say that is if it's Arenado, it's one trade. If it's not, then it's two, probably Matz and Fetty. And then I think you'll see them bring in a bullpen arm, and I think maybe they'll bring in a bench bat that's right-handed maybe. Maybe someone that can play like backup shortstop. That would be my guess.
I think that guy is going to end up being Thomas Sajasi this year.
Didn't they bring a kid over from Cincinnati, too, that was like on their team that was going to be in the minors?
Yeah, I think they'll go with guys internally for that specific role. It was a minor league role.
Yeah.
We'll see what they end up doing, though. I think they'll make I agree with T-Bone's premise. I think they're going to make at least one trade before the start of the regular season. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up next, speaking of the Cardinals, this weekend is winter warm-up, and I can't remember a time, at least since I've moved to St. Louis, when there was less hype for it. There's no new big transaction, no new signing to really introduce. Like last year it was, hey, this is your first opportunity to really meet Sonny Gray. He had his introductory press conference, but this was the first time where it was like, okay, he's had his entire offseason. Now it's go time. This is the start of the excitement of the Sonny Gray era in St. Louis. And it was great. There's nothing like that this year. Nothing. There's no new player to get excited about. There's really not even like a big prospect to get excited about because last year you had a few pitchers and like
Matthews, I think.
Jordan Walker and Mason Wynn had the cup of, for Mason Wynn especially, a cup of coffee where he's coming back the next year. What are you curious about at winter warmup? Because you're going to hear from all of these guys, basically everybody involved in the organization, all the way from ownership down to minor leaguers. What do you want to hear? What do you want to learn from this weekend at winter warmup? We'll discuss that. Want to hear from you. 314-399-9646. That's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
What do I want to hear this year about the Cardinals? Nothing. They're going to be boring. They're going to be bad. I'm so tired of it.
That was James on the Scott Lee Heating and Cooling mic drop feature on the 101 ESPN app. If you guys would like to leave a mic drop, feel free to do so. Winter Warmup is this weekend. And I think James has a pretty strong sentiment there that most Cardinals fans are feeling.
Pulse of the fan base.
There's not a lot of excitement going into this one, and I can't remember the last time that was the case for the Cardinals. Typically, this is all right, yes, the blue season is still taking place, but we're getting close to spring. And so it's really the first sign of, all right, pitchers and catchers are right around the corner. We're getting close to the start of spring where it's not going to be this godforsaken terrible weather anymore. Like, there are some good vibes that come out of this normally, and I don't know that it's going to be the case this weekend, Alex. So I wanted to ask you this question, and I certainly want to hear from the audience as well. 314-399-9646, that's the Air Comfort Service text line. What are you most curious about this weekend? Whether it's from a player, whether it's from John Mozeliak or Bill DeWitt Jr., Bill DeWitt III, from the bottom to the top of the organization, basically everybody is going to be available this weekend. To the media and to you, the fans. A lot of them will be speaking at the main stage over at Ballpark Village at some point over the weekend. So what do you want to learn? Alex, for you, is there any one thing that you're curious about heading into this weekend?
I think if it's me and I'm there to where I can ask John Mozeliak, my biggest curiosity would be, how are you going to handle this roster with Nolan Arenado a part of it? Because I think that's the biggest question surrounding the on-field stuff with this Cardinals team, is what is this going to look like where realistically Nolan Arenado is playing third base for you every single game? Are you getting the development of these younger players you asked for? Are you going to see the at-bats? Are you going to change directions a little bit if you have this type of player? And how do you move forward with this guy who's you're obviously trying to cut bait with a team? I think that is my number one curiosity with the Cardinals.
Somebody on the text line brings up a question that is basically what I'm curious about. From the 314. And T-Bone, I want to hear from you after this. I would like to know the answer to this specific question. Mo, you openly acknowledge the need for a retool, but you have made 0 transactions during the offseason. Has the original goal of a retool evolved in any way? My question is similar to that. How has your plan changed from where you were on day one of the offseason when you had that opening press conference with the exit interviews for the media to where we are today? Because at that point in time, there was a lot of talk of dropping payroll and changes in revenue streams and all of this investment into the minor league system. So, like, some of that has happened. There has been a meaningful change in your payroll. There appears to be a change in the way that they're developing players. They've added a bunch of people to that system. What else has changed, though, from where you were at on day one to where we are today? It is something that I would be very curious about what his answer would be to that, because it seems to me from the outside looking in like there has been a little bit of a change in their thought process, but I don't know. That would be the question for me as well. T-Bone, what's your biggest curiosity heading into this weekend?
Well, I think mine is more on ownership than it is with Mo. And mine ties with payroll of why there is the need to slash payroll much further, because it's clear they're trying to shed $20 to $30 million more. Yep. And they've already shed like $60 million based on not picking up options and stuff like that. My question is why? You know, I understood at the beginning of the offseason when they said payroll was going down, because I mean, you mentioned that end of season press conference. Well, you got to think back at the time they had brought up ticket sales were going to be down, which I assume is still going to be the same thing.
Self-fulfilling prophecy, though. If you're bad, ticket sales go down. Agreed.
And then the other factor was, at the time, they didn't know anything about their TV spot, right? They didn't know what they were going to be. They didn't know if they were going to be on Bally. They didn't know if they were going to be with FanDuel. Well, then they got I think it was a 3-year deal with FanDuel, and it was less, but, I mean, you brought this up a couple weeks ago. Is it that much less than what, like, Kansas City's getting? Like, no, Kansas City's getting less on their original deal, so it's still more than the Royals, and the Royals have not less of a fan base, but they don't draw as well as the St. Louis Cardinals. So do you really need to slash back that much further and get back towards where the Royals are in payroll? I would like to know the answer on that. And then also I'd like to know what the expectation is for this year, because right now it just feels like this is a lost season. And we're not even there yet. We're not even at winter warmup. We're not at pitchers and catchers reporting. I understand what they are saying about going through a retool, but they haven't accomplished the goal of getting to the retool by trading a Nolan Arenado. I've heard Mo say publicly a couple times we still want to be competitive, but yet we're not going to invest into the Major League roster any. In fact, we're still trying to pull away from the Major League roster. So what is the real expectation for this season from ownership? I understand what it is from the front office. I understand what it is supposed to be from the players on the field. But what does ownership expect from the St. Louis Cardinals in 2025?
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. I want to get to a few of these from the text line as well. Somebody from the 636 said, if the goal is to be a rebuilding team, why is there even the entertaining of keeping guys like Helsley, Arenado, or Gray around? Now, that one, I do think there should be a question about, hey, going into the offseason, there was a lot of talk about potentially trading veterans. Some of that had to do with the no-trade clause protection that these guys have, so that plays a factor. But acknowledging that, why did you decide to keep all of them? At least thus far. Why are all of them still here? I would be curious, on the record, what their answer is to that question. Like, why is Helsley still here? Why is Eric Fetty still here? Nolan Arenado, I think we have a better idea of, but I'd be curious the answer to that question.
I kind of to that point, and to what T-Bone said, I'd really be curious of what their goals are this season. Like, from an ownership and front office perspective, what are your goals?
I bet you I could give you Ollie's answer to that question right now.
I feel like all the questions we're asking are, I can answer the questions immediately for what we're going to hear, which is probably why the curiosity isn't there with Winter Warmup, because we've heard this same thing for the last 4 years. But, yeah, I know exactly what Ollie's going to say with the goals of the season.
Yeah, Ollie's going to say our goals never change. It's the St. Louis Cardinal. Our goal every year going into the regular season is to win a championship, and anything less than that is a disappointment. Yeah. That's what Ollie will say.
Well, you know what? I respect the hell out of that answer, Ollie, because I know you're 100% spot on. That will be his answer. Yep. It's hard for me to even be buying into that notion when your front office hasn't spent a dime this offseason.
Ollie will also sell you on the youth movement, and he will sell you on what – there will be some. It will be a very small minority, but there will be some, and we'll probably play the clip for you guys, that hear the clip from Ollie Marmol talking about how excited he is to coach this team and say, you know what? I'm also kind of excited about that specific aspect of the team. Now, there will be more that say he's lying through his teeth. I do not believe what he's saying right now.
And then Pedro Pages starts 80-plus games behind the plate. Michael Ciani starts 120 games in the outfield for the Cardinals.
So somebody on the text line also asked, I would be curious what Chaim Bloom has to say.
Oh, well, this is
I would be as well. I don't think he's talking.
Yeah, he's not.
He's not scheduled to speak as of, at least based on the schedule that they have put out there publicly thus far. There is no mention anywhere on this of Chaim Bloom, which I find strange, if I'm just being totally honest. The whole thing is kind of weird, but whatever, it is what it is. Alex, if the Blues were doing something like this event, do you think Alex Steen would be made available?
No.
And that's where I do have to pull back a little bit, because I probably wouldn't criticize the Blues for that, and so it is a little unfair of me to criticize the Cardinals.
How many times have you heard from Alexander Steen this season? Actually, how many times have you heard from...
He was announced.
Yeah, I was going to say.
To be fair, the Cardinals did
That wasn't even this season, wasn't that last year?
No, it was right before this season, right? When they announced him as
honestly, seasons run together. All I'm saying is
the guy that was going to take over.
When have you heard from him outside of that press conference?
Really, not at all.
Yeah, I've reached out to try and get him on, but he is unavailable.
Isn't Army got another year left?
Yes.
Because this would be my pushback.
2 years, I think.
No, this coming next season will be his final year. So the rest of this season and then next year.
I could understand kind of this year where Steen's not available, and especially like in season, Army's the one that's making the moves. But if the Blues, I mean, they're still going to be a part of retool. If they had an event like this,
I'm taking this back. Steen's not in charge of the #1 priority for the organization. I'm sorry, T-Bone, I just stepped all over you, but the entire organizational goal, you asked what's the goal for this year. The goal is to figure out what's going wrong in the minor leagues. That's the true goal. They won't say that publicly, but it's clear based on their actions. That's the goal. And you know who's been tasked with doing that and overseeing the entire thing? It's Chaim Bloom, who's not talking this weekend. So what? Yes, that is I take back what I said. The criticism is fair.
Yeah, well, and you know what? I was going to get to that point, but the other thing for me is it's not like he's taking over the team next year, right? Like, I hate to say this, and I know you disagree with this. I don't really care what much Mo has to say this weekend, because like he has one task, which is kind of figure out the youth movement this year. But when we're talking about a retool, guys, we're talking about things that are like 3 years down the road of like, what is the true direction of the St. Louis Cardinals? And that's where I would say, hey, if Chaim Bloom still had like 2 years before he took over, I would get to an extent why maybe you don't have him doing a conversation. Because like with Steen's still kind of learning the ropes of doing what Army's doing right now. Steen's never been in a front office role. Chaim Bloom ran the damn Red Sox. He also is the GM for the Tampa Bay Rays, and he's overseeing your development of the minor leagues, and he takes over next year. And this is a very crucial season for Chaim Bloom in this beginning, even though he's not making roster decisions.
So that's
Where is
wild.
he?
So that's
It is
why
wild he's not talking.
So that's why when John Mozeliak speaks or when Ali Marmol speaks, like, this is all fun and fine and dandy, but if I'm not getting words from the guy that is supposed to be in charge of the future of the Cardinals, why should I believe anything you're telling me at this winter warm-up?
It's a fair point. I take back what I said earlier. All right, this is the last one that I wanted to get to. This comes from the 314. Guys, what I'd be curious about is learning more about the hitting approach. Are we getting away from the analytics-driven launch angle focus? What is the plan for their hitting approach?
Now, go back and listen to our Brant Brown interview.
It might be on the best of on Monday.
There you go.
Spoiler.
Great tease.
Thanks, buddy.
Trying to think of the right way to say this without getting Tony.
Oh, no.
Launch angle doesn't matter.
I think the Cardinals are trying to find what the Dodgers have in terms of their approach offensively. I don't know how people hear that. When I say that the Cardinals are trying to do what the Dodgers have done, because that's what Brant Brown comes from. He was with the LA Dodgers previously. Do people hear that and immediately think analytics, Alex? I'm honestly asking. I don't know. Because
I don't hear. I mean, honestly, after what I just watched in the World Series push this year, I don't hear analytics at all.
I'm not sure there's a team that follows analytics more than the LA Dodgers. Like, remember what they did in the postseason a couple of years ago where, like, the front office dictated the decisions with their bullpen for a game? This is where it's really hard for me to describe this without getting into the analytics. Yes, the Cardinals will absolutely be using analytics to drive decisions this year. It will not be the sole focus, but it will influence things, and it has to. So I am also curious about their hitting approach, but it's not about like analytics versus old school. It's how do you incorporate both? How do you get the best from young guys without overwhelming them with their game planning? Like, what is the plan for Jordan Walker? Do you just kind of let him be who he is, or do you try to get him to get the ball in the air? Because as much as people get frustrated with it, that is something that matters for Jordan Walker long term. But at the same age, Aaron Judge was hitting the ball on the ground like crazy, but he was just in college failing instead of being at the major league level and failing. He changed his swing a bit, changed his approach, got the ball in the air, and became Aaron Judge. That's not what I think Jordan Walker will be, but to get even to 50% of that, he's got to get the ball in the air more. So that's... Yes, they're going to use analytics. Yes, it's going to be a part of their approach, but so do the Dodgers, and so does every other good team in Major League Baseball. So it's hard for me to answer that question.
Let me check in on the mic drops that we're getting right now. Damn it, back to the damn analytics again.
NFL Quick Hitters is next. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. All right, boys, let's start out with the big news from earlier today in the NFL. Did you see this report on Deion Sanders?
Yep.
Oh, Deion.
Not buying it.
So, for those of you that didn't see it earlier today, there was a report. This comes from Ed Werder, formerly of ESPN.com, now covers the Dallas Cowboys in Fort Worth. Regarding Deion Sanders, I'm being told that he would almost certainly accept the job if Jerry Jones were to offer it to make him the next head coach of the Cowboys. Those around him are encouraging him to pursue it, and Jerry Jones is, quote, enamored, end quote, with the idea of Deion being the Cowboys' next head coach, end quote. Alex, I'm not sure there's anybody that's more plugged in with the Cowboys than Ed Werder. He spent almost his entire career in Dallas. He knows Jerry Jones. None of this to me is all that surprising. What I'm going to be interested in is, okay, Jerry, you're enamored. You were also enamored a few years ago with, what's his face, Johnny Manziel. And people around him talked him out of taking Johnny Manziel in the draft. And the reason why I bring this up is because the Cowboys, for all the crap that they get, and they deserve most of it, they do have a few people inside of that front office, including his son, that typically talk him out of these kinds of crazy ideas. Can they do it on this? And I do think that the answer, if they talk him out of Deion, I still think they're going to a Cowboy-centric person. Like, it might be Jason Witten.
They just interviewed Kellen Moore for the job.
Kellen Moore.
Yeah.
Like, that's probably the pivot here. Do you buy that Deion Sanders is a real candidate for this job?
Again, I'm not discounting him being a real candidate for this job. This is going to be a disaster. And I have to imagine there are people in the Dallas Cowboys organization that are like, Jerry, what are you doing? Like, this is not going to go the way that you think it's going to go, where Deion comes in and it's ho-hum, we're all best friends, we're going to go out there and try and win a Super Bowl. This is going to turn into Deion saying, this team sucks and we need to make changes. And Jerry saying, well, I'm not making those changes. And then welcome to alpha male on top of alpha male. This is what I call an ish show. And I think it turns into that if you go Deion Sanders.
Can I be honest? I've convinced myself it would work. And
really?
Oh, my God.
Interesting.
Look,
okay.
I didn't think Deion would be a good college coach at Colorado. Now, Jackson State, I thought, okay, maybe he can do something where he brought in Travis Hunter, he brought in some. I could see where he could have made that work. When he got to Colorado and had to play with the big boys at the time, the Pac-12, then the Big 12, I thought, I don't know. I've seen how this has run, and I really didn't expect them to be good this year. And he coached those kids up, and he got them to where, for a while, we thought they would be a playoff team. I think he would have success at Colorado if he stayed there. And the fact that he was able to adjust from the FCS to the FBS level kind of seamlessly within 2 years makes me think he could do the same thing at the NFL level. And the fact that he has such a great relationship with Jerry Jones really makes me think he can make this work, because you have to have a great relationship with him if you're going to make it work, since he talks to the media after every game. I think it could work out if they went that route. I would actually be on board with them hiring him.
Interesting. I love the pivot. I like the take. I'm not willing to go there. And the reason why is because I just don't know how Deion would play with NFL players. Deion is, for all the bluster publicly, he is a hard-nosed guy. And you guys remember the way that he talks to his team when he first got to Colorado. He basically said, like, hey, if you're not good enough, we're getting you rid of your ass. Now, some of that can work at the NFL level. I don't know how much, like, maybe year one it goes better than I'm expecting it to. I wonder if he has the staying power that you would want him to at the NFL. I don't know. I don't know, man. That's typically the issue for college guys that go to the league. Urban Meyer learned this the hard way, is you get up there, you talk to players the same way that you talk to college kids. It just doesn't work the same way. That being said, to argue against myself, I suppose, hey, man, he had some dudes making some pretty decent money on that team. But one of them was his son, and another one was Travis Hunter, who views him kind of as a father figure, apparently. So I don't know. I would be skeptical of it, but I'm probably more open to it working than most are. I'm kind of in the middle, which is a weird place to be with Deion, because I think most people are kind of on one side or the other.
Yeah, I will say, to your point on, like, does he have staying power? I think it's a fair question, but I don't know that there are a ton of coaches in the NFL that have that.
Sure.
Like, it's only really the top, 5 to 10 guys that have that.
I would find this much more interesting than Kellen Moore.
I agree with that
with that one. This is soap opera 2.0.
I don't get all the excitement around Kellen Moore, and this is like the fourth or fifth cycle we've been through where he's getting interviews.
Yeah, he had a lot of success with Dak, so that's probably the real selling point here is, hey, Dak had all of his success. He was like second or third in the MVP voting 2 years ago.
I don't know if
Moore.
I ever looked at them and was like, wow, they are doing something that nobody else is doing.
No, but he had success. And it's the same offense for the most part.
And it was a Jerry Jones guy.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing.
I mean, it's only going to be
for the Cowboys. He coached for the Cowboys. He knows Jerry. He's got a relationship with Jerry, and that's most of the requirements to get a job with Jerry.
Yep, just need to be a Jerry Jones guy.
All right, next thing up here as we go through NFL quick hitters here on 101 ESPN. Did you guys see the quote the other day from Sean Payton?
I did
At
not.
his exit interview with the Cowboys media?
Oh, no, not with the Cowboys media.
Or excuse me, with
Broncos?
Cowboys. The Broncos media?
I did
What's
not.
about the running backs?
Nope.
Oh, then no.
It's about the Kansas City Chiefs. So, Sean Payton was doing his interview, and they asked him about how he would assess the season and all of this, and he said, I felt really good about the next game if we were able to win that one. The Broncos would have played in their next game the Kansas City Chiefs. And there's a lot of pushback on this, as you would probably expect. Can I be the first one to say I get it? I don't blame him for that. Dude, they played the Chiefs as well as anybody this year. The Bills were the only team probably that played the Chiefs better than the Denver Broncos did. The Broncos beat them in Week 18. Now that was against Chiefs backups. And they had them beat until their kick was blocked earlier in the season as well. Why wouldn't Sean Payton have had a lot of confidence going into this week against the Chiefs? Of course he would have. What else were you expecting him to say in that game? So I've seen a lot of people criticizing Sean Payton for that opinion that he had at his end of season press conference. First of all, good on him. I hope that this becomes a real rivalry between the Chiefs and the Broncos. That'd be great for the league to have that kind of a rivalry within the same division. And second of all, why wouldn't he have that kind of confidence going into this game? He played them well this year.
Yeah, well, and it's also called instilling confidence in the group that you're going to be
100%.
back with. Like I've had multiple interviews with Ken Hitchcock, and Ken Hitchcock said that he believes during his time in St. Louis, that team could have won 3 Stanley Cups. Do you expect them to be like, no, we're okay. We're going to this is what coaches say, and I don't blame him for saying it. And he's right. If you take down the Buffalo Bills, who is everybody's Super Bowl darling, and then you go out there and play against the Chiefs, who you're 2-0 against the regular season, why wouldn't you go into that locker room before that game?
1-1, you could have been 2-0 had you not had the kick blocked.
2-0.
I like how you rounded up.
Minus the backups. We all know what that means. But I mean, why wouldn't you go out there and basically tell them, yeah, we could have taken down the Chiefs, or at least made it competitive?
I don't know. For some reason, this quote bugs me. And maybe it's because he got the crap kicked out of him by the Buffalo Bills. And I know the Chiefs, look, you can talk about, hey, they were close. They had a field goal blocked.
Yeah.
And sure, they beat the backups. Who cares about that one? But, they had a field goal blocked. Man, the Chiefs sleepwalked through the regular season, and they still went 14-3 or whatever it was. So I'm going to believe that your team that I looked at that just got killed by the Buffalo Bills, weren't even competitive in that game, was going to go up against the Chiefs, who are now going to be playing their best football and are healthy. I don't know. For some reason, this quote just bugs me. It's one of those where I get what you guys are saying, and I understand.
You don't like confidence?
I get what you're saying. He's got to install confidence in the group because he's going to have a new roster next year. Sure, there's going to be a lot of guys that stay. It's going to be a new roster. So I don't give a damn what he has to say about when they're going to play the Kansas City Chiefs.
Coming from the
they
guy
just got
that
their
was
ass handed to him by the Buffalo Bills on the road.
Coming from the guy that just spews confidence out of his mouth every single day. He hates confidence from someone else.
Hey, man. You said it with your chest, and I do respect that. I definitely respect that. All right, last thing here. Kansas City, margin of victory in the 4 playoff openers that Mahomes didn't get injured in. 2018, they won 31-13 against the Colts, won by 18 points. 2019, beat the Texans 51-31, won by 20 points. 2021, Steelers 42-21 in that game, plus 21. 2023, last year, you guys remember that game, Dolphins 26-7. So they've won all 4 of those games by at least 18 points. All the requirement is here is Mahomes plays in the opener, doesn't get hurt during that playoff opener. They win by at least 18. Are we underselling the possibility that the Chiefs are just going to whomp all over the Texans this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the expectation.
Okay.
Yeah, the moment that the Houston Texans made it to the next round, it didn't matter if it was the Houston Texans or who did they even bleep and play against? Why am I blanking on this right now?
Chargers.
Yeah, or the Chargers. That game wasn't even going to be competitive, in my opinion. So, no, I'm not underselling this. I think I'm exactly where I thought I was.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand all the buzz around the Texans coming into this one. Look, I get they beat the Chargers.
Gotta hype up somebody, man.
None of us were expecting it. Well, can we hype up the Commanders? Like, they've got a shot. The Lions' defense is so beat up.
Have you seen that line? It's continuing to move in the direction of the Lions.
It's ridiculous.
It's 9.5 points.
Yeah,
I think they're
don't buy that.
I think you guys are sleeping on the Lions.
Fair, but I don't get where we got this hype on the Houston Texans when all of us last week just said, oh, that's an easy win for the Chargers. Just because they beat a Chargers team that runs an Iowa offense, I'm supposed to suddenly believe that they can beat the bleeping Kansas City Chiefs? Nah, get out of here. So I didn't see Harbaugh talking about, I would have felt good about our next game. They can note Sean Payton.
I think Harbaugh realized his quarterback was bad.
He's apparently having multiple surgeries in the offseason. So that's what Jim Harbaugh's up to right now. With T-Bone and Alex on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. A little bit of news to pass along. This comes from Ryan O'Reilly, Alex. Want to pass this along before we get to
comes from Ryan O'Reilly?
Ryan O'Reilly.
Like Ryan O'Reilly.
Ryan O'Reilly, when asked about being treated as if he has a no-move clause with the Nashville Predators. Quote, I had a brief chat. I think it's speculation for people outside talking to Barry. I'm part of this team, and I think unless something crazy happens, which we really don't expect, I'm part of this group, and I plan to be in the future. He said he wants me to be a part of it here, too. I'm not worried. This is where I want to be, and this is the group that I'm a part of. End quote.
Okay. I expected to say that. I mean, everybody in that Nashville locker room believes that they're going to go on a run and get to the playoffs still. So Ryan O'Reilly will be approached at the trade deadline and say, we've got an offer for you. Would you be willing to go there? And then Ryan O'Reilly, who will be at that point 12, 13 points out of a playoff spot, will say, yeah, let's go to Toronto. Let's go to St. Louis. Let's go for a shot to get to the playoffs where I'm familiar with rather than here.
All right. Just saying. Found it to be interesting.
What you want him to say? Hey, Ryan, what do you make of this trade special? Hell yeah, I am ready to get the bleep out of here.
We suck.
This team blows.
We're now 45 games into the regular season for the St. Louis Blues. They have fewer than 50 points at this mark in the season. Who are some of the teams that had fewer than 50 points at this point of the season that ended up going to the playoffs, and what can the Blues learn from them? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
T-Bone here to tell you about Pick 6 from DraftKings. The NFL playoffs are underway, and no one does fantasy sports like DraftKings, the official daily fantasy sports partner of the Kansas City Chiefs. Play for better payouts on Pick 6. It's super easy to get started. Select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. Looking at the Chiefs game this weekend, it's Travis Kelce time because it's playoff football, so I like Kelce more than 52.5 receiving yards, Mahomes more than 248.5 passing yards because I think the Texans are going to be trailing. Stroud more than 34.5 pass attempts. $10 on that can win you 40 plus on Pick 6. And DraftKings is making it even sweeter for first timers. New Pick 6 customers play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Chiefs Kingdom, win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use my code 101WXOS. That's code 101WXOS for new customers. Play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800 Gambler. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus award is now available. Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tonight as they host the Calgary Flames. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 7. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alex, when I was looking earlier today, I was considering, okay, who are the teams that the Blues can point to that were in a similar spot at this point in the season that ended up making the playoffs, and what they have to do to get there with Alex and T-Bone on BK. So the Blues right now, fewer than 50 points through the 45-game mark of the regular season. If you're looking back at the last 5 full seasons, so non-COVID years, so we're eliminating 2 seasons in there because they played, 56 games. It changes the dynamics of what the playoffs end up becoming because there's just less runway for these teams to get back into it. But full season, last 5 years, there were 5 teams that had fewer than 50 points at this point in the season that ended up making it to the postseason, okay? Those teams were last year's Islanders, the 2023 Panthers, and then 3 teams in 2019 did this, interestingly enough. The Blues, of course, were one of those teams. It was the Blues, the Ducks, and the Hurricanes that all did it in 2019. Here were some of the stretches that those teams went on after the 45-game mark to be able to get into the postseason. The 2024 Islanders won 6 straight and had points in 9 straight. Those were 2 separate streaks. So basically 2 separate streaks of 6 in a row and points in 9 games in a row. 2023, the Florida Panthers. That team ended up going to the Stanley Cup that year, but losing there. They won 6 games in a row, and then they had a separate streak of points in 7 straight. The 2019 Ducks had points in 10 out of 11, and another stretch, 8 out of 9. The 2019 Hurricanes had points in 11 out of 13 games at one point down the stretch. And the 2019 Blues, you guys know the story, won 11 straight and had another stretch of 8 out of 10. So when we talk about the Blues needing to get hot, that's what we're talking about. That's what it requires. When you are where they are currently in the standings, you have got to have at least one stretch of, even if it's not 6 straight wins, 6 straight games where you get points, and then extend that to a 10-game window where you get points in like 8 of them, and then do it again. You can't just do that once. All of these teams had at least 2 stretches where it was like, oh, damn, that team's getting hot at the right time. Alex, is this the stretch where you think that can happen for him?
Yeah.
Can this be the start of one of those 2 stretches?
Yeah, I think this is the start of the 6 games in a row stretch. And I know I'm going to sound like the guy that has said this multiple times because I've said this a couple of other winning streaks, but this has to be the stretch. Let me rephrase it that way, where they reel off 5, 6, 7 wins in a row. And if you look at that Florida Panthers team, it wasn't until about late January that they reeled off 5 or 6 games in a row. But the opponents that are in front of you now, and it's not that they're easy, but they're in the same tier as you are, like Calgary and Vancouver. Vegas is going to be a little bit higher up, but Utah, these are the teams that you should be able to compete with and pull off victories with. Why I don't believe they can put together a 6 or 7 game win streak is when you're playing 9 games in 15 days against the LA Kings, against the Winnipeg Jets, against the Colorado Avalanche on the road with back-to-backs. That's why this schedule sets up well for them, and they should do it because you've got days off in between. You've got 0 back-to-backs. You're taking on teams that are in the same level as you, and the question of how do you go about accomplishing that, well, look at that stretch for the Florida Panthers the year that we're referencing. In 45 games where they went 26-15-4, their offense was 168 goals, so 5th best in the National Hockey League, but goal suppression became something that they were better at. And that's what this is going to come down to for St. Louis.
Yeah, I think if it's not now, then it's not going to happen. And the reason I say that, I agree with everything you said. It's a lot easier, not a lot easier, but it's easier to imagine it now because of the off days than when you get back from 4 nations and you have to play back-to-backs and you've got 9 and 15. Like, that's a brutal stretch. And to just come in and just assume you're going to have your A game in all of those games it's just not going to happen. And I think the other reason it's super important for the Blues is what BK had mentioned early on in the first segment today is, hey, man, they're playing basically to the 4 nations break, and then after that, Army decides the future of the team because they will be a team that is, because they are in the midst of a retool and they haven't pushed all their chips in yet, There is no more there will not be just patience to see if this team figures it out. Decisions will be made. That Panthers team, they were in their win now mode. Even though they had gotten off to a slow start that year in 22-23, they were in win now mode because they pushed their chips in. They went out and got Kachuk that offseason. So even if they got off to a slow start, they were probably going to be a little bit more patient with it, if not more aggressive, because they'd already committed to pushing their chips in. I don't know if Army's 100% at that spot yet, which makes this stretch so important.
Alex, what do you think it's going to require points-wise to get into the playoffs this year?
If this thing keeps playing the way it's going, I think about 94, 95 points.
Because the 2023 Panthers got to 92. The 2019 Avalanche, who were another team that you could throw onto this list, they had an 8 out of 10 stretch and a 4-game winning streak. They got to 90. So those teams, if you think that's what it's going to take, cross them off. They didn't do enough. And those were teams that were similar spot at this point in the season to you. They had a 6-game winning streak and then 7 straight with the points. And then the Avs had an 8 out of 10 and a 4-game winning streak. But the Avs also had a losing streak in there. I think it was at 7 in a row at some point in the second half of the season. So it is such a high bar for this team to be able to clear. It's why that hole that they dug themselves is so difficult to be able to get out of. Like, you're talking about them needing 48 points the rest of the way?
Yeah, well, Vancouver right now, if you put their point pace to what it would be at the end of the season, if they just stayed a 558 point percentage team, they'd be at 90 points. And Calgary, if you do that, they'd be at about 91 points. Man. So you need 92. And that would be, quick math here for you, 46 points, 47 points. So you're talking about 23 wins.
Man.
All right.
When you start doing the math on this, like, it goes quick, man.
Yep.
We're talking about like just quick math on it, the way that you could potentially set it up. I mean, 22, 11, and 4 probably gets you in. That's the kind of stretch that we're talking about them having to go on the rest of the way.
Let me see. So the point pace for the Blues that
would get you to 94 points this year.
Yeah, so they're on pace right now for 19 more wins, which would be 38 points, which would put you at 84. So you have to play.
Yeah, 22, 11, and 4 gets you to 48 points the rest of the way, which gets you to 94 on the season. 22, 11, 4.
Which, if you break it up into 10-game segments,
you have to win twice as many games as you lose.
If you break it up into every 10-segment games, like what Ken Hitchcock used to always talk about, what Jim Montgomery has mentioned, you're talking about pulling off like 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 wins every 10 games.
6 out of 10 with wins, and you get a point in one of those other games. That would get you to the playoffs this year.
And like, even hearing that, like, their points percentage, I'm not even going under Monty, but like under Bannister last year, where they really improved, I don't even think he was at that points percentage to get to that pace. You're talking about like 94 points.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I think he was up to like 90, 91, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, his point percentage was like clipping at like 580, I think it was.
Yeah.
And Jim Montgomery's point percentage since he's taken over the Blues is 587.
For context on this, we're talking about them being at like a 65% points percentage or so, roughly around there. Teams in the NHL so far this year that have been able to beat that clip.
There's got to be a big list.
The Capitals.
Okay. We talked about them in the office.
The Jets, the Golden Knights, the Oilers, the Stars, end of list.
All right.
In other words, 5 teams. You have to be a top 5 team in the NHL the rest of the way.
Drew Bannister was 602 point percentage.
Yeah, which wouldn't be good enough.
Yeah. You're at 587 under Jim Montgomery, so you need like 2 or 3 more wins than what you did with Drew Bannister last year.
All right. I don't feel as bad as.
Do you guys think that they have that in them?
No.
I think they do.
Realistically, do they have that kind of a run in them?
I think they have a run in them, but it has to start with this one. If you lay an egg tonight, I will change my tune.
I don't think it's currently constructed they have that in them.
I agree.
And the reason why I say it that way, it's why these next few games are so important. Because what you do over your next 10 will dictate what they do at the deadline. And what they do at the deadline, to me, dictates whether or not they have this kind of a run in them. So this group, can they win 7 out of the next 10? I could see that. It's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy. I don't know that they can win 7 out of the next 10 and then win 7 out of the next 10 and then win 7 out of the next 10 and then win another 7 out of the next 10. And that's what will be required. So I think they need reinforcements to do that. Maybe a third line center, maybe another little bit of a scoring punch. Taylor Hall, you mentioned the other day, that kind of a move. add one or two pieces to this puzzle, yeah, maybe then they could do it in a Western Conference that I don't think is necessarily as strong as we expected it to be going into the regular season. So maybe it ends up being 92 points that gets you in instead of the 94. And so it comes back just a little bit, makes it a little easier to crack through. But it's going to require some reinforcements, in my opinion. And that requires a big win tonight, probably a big win on Saturday,
A big one
and
after
then
that.
keep it going from there, baby.
So like 10-game stretch. Let's just say the 10-game stretch began last night against the Tuesday night against the Calgary Flames. So you plot out 10 more games. You're talking about Colorado, Vegas twice, Dallas, Vancouver, and Utah twice.
There's not 7 wins there. Not for that. They
You get another one against Cal. So you get 2 versus Calgary, 2 versus Utah. That's 4.
They beat Calgary.
But let's assume that they're going to win against the teams that are on the same level as them. Vancouver would be 5. And now you're talking about 2 more wins, one of them in the 2 against Vegas, 1 against Colorado, 1 against Dallas.
None of this is, nobody said this was supposed to be easy.
And they're not even playing at the points percentage that we just lead under Montgomery. And I give them credit. They played better under Monty. They still show that they are the same, not the same team. But they can't string anything together just like they couldn't string anything together under Bannister.
And to be fair, they kind of have. They just dug themselves such a hole early on in the regular season.
November screwed you up.
Like, if they were playing at this pace all year long, they could make the playoffs.
Yeah.
By just continuing to play at this level and maybe upping it a little bit, adding one piece maybe or tinkering here or there. But they dug themselves such a hole that it becomes really, really difficult to be able to get out of it.
November screwed you over because you lost 8 games. And a lot of this was the injuries that you were in the midst of, but you lost 8 games. And you look back on it, that Boston Bruins game that you lost at home in regulation, the overtime versus Buffalo, the overtime versus Boston. Now, some of that was good for the Blues because, got Jim Montgomery fired, but November screwed you. And this is what Joe always says. You don't make the playoffs in November, but you lose the playoffs by Thanksgiving.
And that might be what ended up happening. Yeah. We'll see what happens over the next few days. Alex has pregame coverage for Blues versus the Flames. Coming up tonight, pregame at 6, puck drop for that one at 7 with Alex and T-Bone on BK. Junk Drawer coming up next year on 101 ESPN. All right, let's dive into the junk drawer with Alex and T-Bone on BK. Coming up in the 1 o'clock hour, we are going to give you another chance to win a pair of tickets to see Chris Stapleton. We're doing it once every show this week, so you got 2 more opportunities here on BK and Ferrario. And Alex, that ain't it. 2 more opportunities on the fast lane as well.
Whoa.
This week, 4 more chances for you to score a pair of tickets to see Chris Stapleton, so stay locked in for that. Alex, what do you got for us today in the junk drawer?
So, boys, I had my first experience last night of night terrors with my oldest. I didn't know what this was because, like, Katie didn't have this issue when she was a kid. I shouldn't say issue, but we didn't have this when we were kids. And typically, like, our nighttime stuff, as we get Adelaide down, she goes to sleep. And there's occasions that she'll wake up in the middle of the night and she'll kind of, like, sob, whether her toy drops off the bed or she kind of falls out of the bed. She's done that a couple of times. And we go in and we walk in and we kind of, like, soothe her and she goes back to sleep. Last night we went in because she woke up, she was sitting in her bed, and she was just like sobbing. And we're like, what the hell? And so we went in to try and soothe her. Her eyes were closed, and she was sitting in bed. And I mean, her toes and her fingers were curling, and she was like screaming. And when you tried to soothe her, she started wailing on you. And so Katie originally was like, hey, I think this is a thing of night terrors. Just let her be. And I was like, I don't think that's what this is. So I tried to hug her, and she lost her ever-loving mind. And so it scared the bejesus out of me. And finally what we did was just kind of like, we laid her down on the pillow, which she had her, like, freak outfit, and we kind of, like, pet her head to try and get her to calm down, and she fell asleep no problem. It scared the hell out. Like, I feel like I had night terrors the rest of that night.
Did you ask her follow-up questions on it? Like, did you ask her what it was about? What did she see or anything like that?
No, because by the time I was leaving this morning, she was, like, just getting up and doing breakfast. So I don't know if Katie did or not. But, I mean, typically we'll ask her if, like, because she'll wake up and she'll cry in the middle of the night. We'll say, hey, what happened last night? She's like, oh, I woke up and I had to get bare and put myself back to sleep. It's like, that one was really scary. And the part that scared me the most was watching her toes and her fingers curl and, like, stretch out. Because I'm like, is she having a panic attack right now?
I had one experience with them. T-Bone, have you ever had night terrors before whenever you were younger?
I think I did when I was younger. I know my sister did. I'm pretty sure I did, too.
I still remember it. I was very young. I was probably like 6, maybe younger than that even. I still remember. I saw spiders everywhere in the room.
Oh,
I don't know what it came from. Why? I don't have like this fear of spiders. Maybe I did at the time. I don't know. But I saw spiders everywhere, and they were crawling on my body to the point where they were like overtaking me. I was like underwater with just spiders all over my body. And I saw them everywhere, and I was like screaming at my mom saying like, you've got to get them out. You've got to get them out. And she was like you were, Alex, where she had no idea what was happening and, like, did not
that kills me
understand.
To hear, because I'm worried Adelaide had something like that last night.
And it was the one time. I never had it again. It was one experience for me. I know some people have, like, recurring night terrors where it's just horrifying. I don't wish it on my worst enemy, but, yeah, I still, to this day, remember that experience that night. I strangely remember, like, sitting up in my bed, and I'm guessing my eyes were also closed. I don't know. It's a horrifying experience.
Well, and so I couldn't fall back asleep last night. So, I mean, I tossed and turned the rest of the night because I was panicking. I'm like, oh, my God, what's wrong with her? And so I was looking up, like, what happens. And a lot of it, they say, can happen from exhaustion. And we're trying to transition her away from naps because night times have been so difficult when she takes a nap. And so the last 2 days, she hasn't taken naps, and she's been super tired, and you finally get her to bed. So we were like, okay, well, maybe that's it. So maybe we need to keep the naps. Like, I panicked so much because that scared me even more. It's like, well, I hate the fact that my daughter's having a bad dream of something.
Yeah, there's just nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. You just hope that they get through it.
Kills you.
They will get through it, but you hope that they're, they don't hurt themselves or anybody else in the experience while it's taking place.
And that's kind of why we went in. And I told Katie that it's like that. Because I've always said that sleepwalking scares the hell out of me.
Oh, dude, it's crazy.
I had a friend who used to do that, and I refused to stay at his house because he sleptwalked. And I'm like, I won't do it anymore.
Have you seen that documentary on Netflix about the guy that was His defense, at least, was that he was sleepwalking and killed somebody while he was sleepwalking, the roommate while he was sleepwalking, and he has no recollection of any of it. That stuff is crazy, man.
So that was one of my first parenting
to bring that
moments.
Up in reference to a story about your daughter having night terrors,
that was one of my first parenting moments where I'm like, oh my God, this is frightening.
We really sue them over there, BK.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy. Guys. Told him it's one of the most jarring experiences of my youth, and then
let you know how round 2 goes tonight.
Hopefully everything goes better. He's Alex's T-Bone on BK. Coming up next, so there's a stat that I found yesterday about some of the underdogs that people are picking right now, including myself, to pull off an upset this weekend. How unlikely is it for either the Commanders or the Texans to win? We'll discuss it next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. So I like the Commanders this weekend. I like them on the money line. I think they have a really good chance to win outright. Here, one slight problem. They're a 9.5-point underdog, and the line keeps getting bigger, not smaller. So everybody else disagrees with old BK on this one, Alex. So yesterday I was curious, all right, how often has this happened? Where a team that is at least an 8-point underdog ends up winning outright. So I looked it up. Alex, in the last decade, there have been 2 teams that won as at least an 8-point underdog in the postseason. It was actually the same team. It was the Tennessee Titans, and they did it twice over a 3-year stretch. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs in that weird game where Marcus Mariota completed a pass to himself. There was a play where Mariota clearly fumbled the football. They called forward progress. The Chiefs did pick the ball up. Instead, it was Titans' ball going the other direction. I think Kelsey got hurt in that one in the first half as well. Just an overall really weird game. Titans find a way to win it. And then the other one was the Titans beating the Ravens. You guys remember this one. This was one of the early Lamar Jackson playoff failures. Titans find a way to win that one as well. So it's happened 2 times. The teams are a combined 23-2 straight up over the last decade when they are favored by at least 8 points. The Chiefs are favored by more than 8 this weekend against the Houston Texans, and the Detroit Lions obviously are favored by more than 8 points against the Washington Commanders. Does this change your perspective at all, Alex, on picking the Commanders to potentially have any real chance to be able to beat the Lions, or the Texans for that matter? I suppose people could be picking the Texans as well.
I'm not picking the Texans. Surprise, surprise. It doesn't change mine because I originally thought that the Lions were going to win this one. I would take the Commanders plus the points. I think the Commanders keep it close, and frankly, I think this comes down to one possession at the end of the fourth quarter. But I would take the Lions, and I was going to take the Lions in this one.
For what it's worth, against the spread, again, 23-2 straight up. Against the spread, 15-10 are the teams that are favored by at least 8 points. So slightly
feel
above
better about that one.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily surprise me because once you get to the playoffs, things tighten up a little bit, and once you get over a touchdown score, then I kind of like the team on the points when they're the underdog. But it doesn't change my opinion at all. I get what the numbers say, but I'm going by the eye test, right? And the eye test tells me the Lions' defense is beat up. And look, I get they played well against Minnesota in their final game. Everybody watched what happened to Minnesota when they played the Rams. Yeah, Sam Darnold stinks. So I don't care what their defense did against him. I said it at the time, and we'll see if it holds true. I thought that last game of the regular season was more about Sam Darnold than it is about the Lions' defense. And if that's the case, I just saw Jane Daniels play pretty well for Washington in their win against Tampa Bay. I think the Commanders are going to put up points. It comes down to, does the Commanders' defense get enough stops on that Lions' great offense? I think they will. I like the Commanders in this one this weekend.
So it doesn't dissuade you at all. You're still very much in favor of the Commanders.
Because I don't think those numbers, if the Lions were healthy and they had like Hutchinson was playing in this game and their defense had most of their pieces there, I would pick the Lions. Because that I could see where the numbers are in like Vegas is saying, hey, the Lions clearly best team in the NFL. They've got maybe the best roster in the NFC. They should win by more than a touchdown against the Commanders. I think these numbers are high on the offense and underplaying I want to say how bad, underplaying how hurt the Lions' defense is.
But it's not just the numbers. The market is dictated also by the sports bettors. So if there's a ton of money
all the time.
Do they?
Fair. Vegas doesn't very often.
No, Vegas does not.
So if you see a ton of money coming in on the Commanders, plus at one point I think it was 8.5 if I'm not mistaken, and now it's all the way up to 9.5. If you see a bunch of money come in on the Commanders, sharp money especially, they will adjust the line accordingly because they don't want to be on the line for a ton of money one way or the other. They're fine with having a little bit of exposure to a team, but they don't want like 90% of the dollars coming in on the Lions, for example. So it seems pretty clear Vegas has an opinion on the Lions versus the Commanders. That is that the Lions are a much better team. And the public sentiment seems to be the same. Sometimes when we get into these spots, it makes me revisit, okay, why am I so far away? What everybody else seemed to believe, the numbers on the Lions, the public sentiment on the Lions, everything seems to be going like heavily in one direction. And then here I am running in the other direction, ready to be a lone wolf out here. And to answer my own question, it does dissuade me a little bit. I'm gonna pick the Commanders because I'm an insane person, but this makes me revisit a little bit. It is historically very unlikely for teams at this kind of a deficit to be able to win straight up against the opposition. I love them plus the points. I think this is way too many points in favor of Detroit. But for them to be able to win outright, I might have gotten out a little bit over my skis on that.
And see, here's the part for me. We're talking
I'm so disappointed.
Again, I'm still going to pick them, but
I don't want to. You have to say it with your chest.
We're talking so much about how the Lions' defense is depleted and they're not going to be able to get a stop. Are we talking enough about how the Washington side's defense isn't going to be able to get a stop also against the Lions?
That's my concern.
And because I get it. Defensively, you do look very vulnerable against Washington, and I'm not putting any stock into the Minnesota Vikings. But like you gave up 24 points to the Falcons before the end of the season. You gave up 33 to the Eagles. You just did give up 20 points to the Buccaneers, and you're going up against the best offense in the National Football League. Like, I don't think we're giving enough credit to what the Detroit Lions offense has done this season going up against the Commanders.
I think that's fair. I still like Washington in this one.
Cool. Just give me your money instead.
Okay.
Like, just send it to me.
Okay. I'm so disappointed in BK and him just backing away now.
Come on, man. This dude hops the fence all the time.
Somebody on the text line brings up something that I do think we should probably address from the 314. All the Lions have done this year is go 15-2, and their 2 losses are by a combined 8 points. and they took place against two playoff teams. Those two playoff teams, of course, are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who the Commanders just beat. But that happened in week 2. It's like a different season at this point. And the Buffalo Bills, who beat them 48-42 about a month ago now. I do think it is worth noting, to T-Bone's point, they've had a ton of injuries that have accumulated. And these are the teams that they have played in the second half of the regular season. The Jacksonville Jaguars, the Indianapolis Colts, the Chicago Bears, the Green Bay Packers, and then the Buffalo Bills, who put up 48 on them, the Bears again, the corpse of the San Francisco 49ers, and then the Minnesota Vikings, who just laid an egg the following week when they played in the postseason. That's not a whole lot of teams that can take advantage of the defensive issues that exist for the Detroit Lions. Jacksonville can't. Indy can't. Chicago can't. San Francisco at that point in time, I didn't think could, and then they scored 34 on them. The Buffalo Bills could. The Green Bay Packers could. They both scored 48 and 31. So the three teams that were capable of doing anything offensively against the Lions that could actually take advantage of it because they had the personnel to do so. The Packers, the Bills, and the San Francisco 49ers. Those teams scored 31, 48, and 34 against them. I think Washington's putting up points in this game, man. It's really a question to me of, can they get stops? I think the Texans are a completely different conversation.
Oh, yeah, that one's...
That game to me is about, can the Chiefs get to 27? Because I don't think the Texans can. And I think the Chiefs can get to 27 against them. The Commanders might have to get to 40. And that's where the real question lies for this one. So I find this to be, to me, the most compelling non-Ravens-Bills matchup of the weekend, and despite the line.
And that's why this one comes down to experience versus inexperience, in my opinion. I'll take Dan Campbell and Jared Goff with that offense over Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels any day of the week.
See, and the weird thing is, and I don't know if this is fair or not, and it's probably just from my prior experiences with him, I don't trust Goff. I think if this game is tight and the pressure is on, and it will be on Detroit more than it will be Washington. I mean, Washington's coming in at a 9.5-point underdog, man. They got nothing to lose. They weren't supposed to be here. Exactly. Detroit's supposed to be in the NFC Championship game. Detroit's supposed to be in the Super Bowl. And I don't trust Goff to, if the pressure is on, Goff's going to be the guy that makes a play. And I also don't trust Campbell in his fourth down decision making. I think Campbell, whether it's this game or in the NFC Championship game, will make a decision that will cost the Detroit Lions.
You trust Dan Quinn in his fourth?
Did he watch the Commanders?
I saw Dan Quinn. Hey, and I was critical of Dan Quinn.
I know.
I didn't say it on air, but I was critical of Dan Quinn in our group text thread. I thought he did not handle that very well.
All I know is
but
one of those
the Lions,
coaches.
I think he has to do it.
All I know is one of those coaches are going to screw the game up, and we will be talking about Dan Quinn or Dan Campbell more so than the other players.
I'll defend him. I'll say it was the right call. It just didn't work out. You had to go for it. I do think this is a game, and T-Bone's going to get really mad about it. I can already see the text coming through. I can't believe you got to take the points there. You got to take the points. That's what T-Bone's going to be saying, screaming from the mountaintops as the Commanders or the Lions end up missing out on a 4th and 1 from the 35. That is 100% going to happen this weekend. And why? Because these teams both know you can't win this game with field goals, man. If you keep settling for field goals repeatedly, you will lose. Because the other team is going to keep going for 6. This is a game that I think will be played into the 30s. The over-under for it is 55.5. It's one of the highest point totals that we've seen in a playoff game in recent memory. And I think it's going to go over. I don't know how either defense gets stops in this game. So I think it could be, this is another one of those games for the Commanders where I think their offense might have 0 punts. And it will be because they're going to be kicking field goals or they're going to be going for it on 4th down all the time. It's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. All right, he's Alex's T-Bone on BK. Coming up in 15 minutes, this is why you hire Jim Montgomery. He said something earlier today that caught all of our attention. We'll get into that coming up in 15 minutes. Believe it or not is coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so
free. We're flying away on a wing and a prayer. Who could it be?
Believe it or not, it's just me.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for Believe It or Not. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are believing it or not here on 101 ESPN. Alex, I'm going to start with a question that T-Bone mentioned to us the other day. We weren't able to talk about it yesterday. I wanted to wait until T-Bone got back into the studio with us. Believe it or not, given what Mizzou has added via the transfer portal, next season is a playoff or bust season once again for the Tigers. Believe it or not, Mizzou's 2025 football season will be playoff or bust for them.
Go ahead, Tanner. You were the one that started this conversation in our text chain.
I've now convinced myself, believe it. I think if you're going to end up with the best transfer class in the SEC and one of the best in the country, and look, I get that it's on a lot of it's on the defensive side of the ball, and there's a lot of questions about what the quarterback position is. Hey, man, I've seen if you got a great defense, you can make the college football playoff. You know, there were good quarterbacks in this year's playoff. I don't think there were any that were great. So I would say believe it. I think now expectation should be that the Missouri Tigers, and knowing how their schedule kind of lines up again next year where they are going to avoid some of the blue bloods in the SEC, I'm going to say believe it. I think it is now expectation is playoff or bust for the 2025 Mizzou Tiger football season.
I agree with Tanner.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep. I think it's playoff or bust now. Yeah, I mean, you've made some really good transfer portal gets. And I know that Prabula is the biggest question mark right now, and he could be great, he could be bad, who knows? Your defense, like Tanner just mentioned, should be great. And the fact that if your defense is great, it should put you in the college football playoff conversation. So I agree. When you get these types of transfer portal hauls, this puts me back into the college football or bust playoffs.
Man, I'm not believing this, as you guys can probably imagine. I just have too many questions about the quarterback position. I don't know. I have no idea if Bo Prabula is going to be good, much less a guy that can get you to the playoff. And I certainly don't know how he's going to perform in the clutch situations. For all the criticism about Brady Cook, much of which this year I think was valid. 2 years ago, I think it was unfair. This year, I think a lot of it was valid. That dude was clutch. In the big moments, more often than not, that guy came through. Think about what it was 2 years ago against Florida, 2 years ago against Kansas State, this past season even, down the stretch. When you needed a play, he came through more often than not. I don't know if that's going to be the case for Bo Prabula or not. It might be. It might not be. And in that scenario, hard for me to believe that they are suddenly going to be a playoff contender. Now, the defense, I think, has a chance to be even better next year. I think it might be the best team that defensively that we have seen over the past 3 seasons. So 2 years ago, plus last year, and then this upcoming year. This could be the number one defense of that group, which raises the ceiling by a pretty significant margin for the team if they got the quarterback position right. But I was looking through this yesterday. I think teams that, as of today, should be viewed as having a better quarterback situation in the SEC than Missouri. Florida, LSU, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Texas A&M, and Vanderbilt. That's half the damn conference that has a better quarterback situation than you do as of today. That could change, but that means that it's, for me, difficult to say that it's playoff or bust.
My counter question to that is, how many defenses would you say could be better than Mizzou going into next year?
Fair question, and that is a shorter list.
Because I get what you're saying about the quarterback spot. Man, I've seen teams with great defenses, they can make the playoff and have questions at quarterback. And I think that's what it comes down to for Mizzou. Like, I don't know if, I mean, it's definitely in the range of outcomes, but I feel confident enough that Drinkwitz can evaluate a quarterback to where he can just end up with like a middling quarterback in the SEC. They get a middling quarterback in the SEC, they can make the college football playoff.
I think that's fair. And if you, like SEC teams that I think have a better quarterback situation that also have a better defense than Missouri, that is a really small list. Tennessee, probably Texas, Texas A&M, maybe South Carolina, maybe Oklahoma. It's probably it. It's like 5 teams. And Bo Prabula could change that. Like, Oklahoma has a really good quarterback position. They got the guy from Washington State. That guy's a stud. Oklahoma might be good next year. Tears me inside to say that, but they might be good next year. Some of these other teams, though, man, it's an open-ended question on what they're going to be. Hell, even Texas. You guys know how much I love Arch Manning, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so what do you got?
Did I just convince you? You ready to?
No, not playoff or bust.
No, nice try. Nice try on that one.
Hope for the playoff. Not playoff or bust.
BK will celebrate a 9-win season.
Bo Pribula's a good quarterback, but not a difference maker. That's a good year, man.
There he is.
I can't criticize those
Him
seasons.
and his good year.
Believe it or not, guys, Dylan Holloway finishes the year playing with Robert Thomas on the top line.
Not. It'll require them to make a pretty significant move to improve that second line, and I don't know that that's going to happen, so I'll say not. I think they like having Thomas and Booch, and then Holloway with Shin.
Yeah, I'm going to say not. I agree with BK. I think they like that combination that he just read off, so I'm going to say not believe him.
I think you're more likely to see Booch drop down and Kyrou go up than you are to see Holloway go up.
I'm believing this one because I think when you see some of the AHL call-ups or the trade deadline acquisitions, they're going to put Holloway up there. I really wonder if they view Dylan Holloway as that's the top line guy we've been talking about, and now we got to go out there and find a second line winger that can come in. I think they really believe Dylan Holloway has top line potential.
I wonder if that's something you see happen. You said end of the season?
End of the season.
The one scenario that I could see you being right on this for sure is Snuggerud coming up. Because if Snuggerud gets here and you put him on that second line, you could put Holloway on that top line. Because I don't think they're going to have Snuggerud on the third line.
I think some of this is Dvorsky, too. I mean, I forgot who we talked to that basically said, like, look, Dvorsky's here. He's going to be, it was the guy that covered him in World Juniors. Dvorsky's here. He's going to be in your top six. I wonder if they put him on the wing with Shen and Kyrou. At some point towards the end of the season, give Holloway a look with Thomas and Buchnevich, and then Snuggerud gets there, and then you adjust even more.
T-Bone?
Guys, earlier we talked about the top 10 positions in baseball, and we talked about, who on the Cardinals could be top 7. Believe it or not, Mason Wynn will be a top 7 shortstop by the end of 2025.
7 is high. That's why you went with that. I like what you did there. I'll be optimistic. Why not? I said that he can be a star next year, so I certainly have to believe that he can be a top 7 player at his position. It's a really high bar to clear. There are 7 excellent shortstops in Major League Baseball right now. I'll say he's among them, so go ahead, believe it.
You said by the end of this season?
Yeah.
I'm not going to believe it. I think if you gave me a 2-year window, I would believe it. I think this season is going to be a little bit of
regression.
Yeah, falling back down, and then after that, you kind of skyrocket the following year.
Before you answer, here are the guys that he's competing with, right? Bobby Witt Jr., Gunnar Henderson, Francisco Lindor, Ellie De La Cruz, Willie Adames. Is he for sure playing shortstop this year? Do we know?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
why can't I remember? Who
Dodgers.
did he sign with? No, he didn't sign
No,
with
not the Dodgers.
San Francisco.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, he's that
Giants.
short.
Okay. And then where did I finish?
Random.
Seager, Trey Turner. Those are probably the top 7,
Correa.
assuming Mookie is not. Oh, yeah. God. Assuming that Mookie is not playing.
Damn, he's not even top 10.
God, how did I forget about Carlos Correa?
Because he never plays.
Yeah, he's always hurt. He's Lars Nootbaar.
I'll believe it. And here's twofold. One, as the season gets closer, maybe it's just me looking for something to latch onto with this damn team. I think maybe he could add some more pop to his game. I mean, he hit for power in the minors. I wonder if now is the year where you see less of the slap hitting, adjusts, adds a little bit more pop. Maybe some of the average goes down. And then on top of his Gold Glove caliber defense. And then 2 is I just like some of those guys I don't know if like Betts. I don't think he's going to be a shortstop all year. I think Carlos Correa won't be able to stay healthy, which will hurt his value. Same with Corey Seager. Corey Seager's had some issues with staying healthy. So just by that thought process, I think he could be like number 7. So I'll say believe it, top 7.
All right, let's get to the text from the 314. Guys, believe it or not, there will not be a single legit franchise quarterback in this year's draft, and we'll remember it similarly to the 2021 or 2022 drafts.
I'll believe
it or not, we will lack any franchise quarterbacks in this year's class.
I'll believe it because your hope is Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, and I don't think either of those guys are franchise quarterbacks.
Somebody on Twitter asked the other day what the comparison is for Shedeur Sanders, and I didn't love the comparison.
Who
was
was
like
it?
Chad Pennington, Kirk Cousins.
Kirk's been around.
I think Shedeur has a lot of Justin Fields in him.
I guess it just
I don't
depends.
feel that way at all about him. He can't move.
Well, no, what I'm saying is like, looks like he could be the number 1 guy, but never lives up to it.
Okay.
Not play style.
I guess it depends on how we want to call franchise, because I could see where Shedeur would end up being like Kirk Cousins. Guy's in the league a while, is a starter, but it is never a top 10 quarterback. Is always in that like 10 to 20 range, kind of fluctuates. Teams are always like, oh my God, we have to pay that guy $30 million just because we don't have a quarterback. So,
And the truth is, every team that had Kirk Cousins wanted to move on from Kirk Cousins.
yeah, like that's what I see as Shedeur's path. So if you're going to call that a franchise guy, then I would say not believe it. If you're not going to, then I would say believe it. It just depends on your definition.
All right, 314. I'm with you guys. I do not think that there is. Cam Ward's the one that I find more interesting.
I was going to say, who's the better out of the two?
Cam Ward.
That's kind of who I thought as well.
I think there's more bust potential with Cam Ward. Like, I think the floor and the ceiling are really close on Shedeur Sanders. I think he's going to be solid. Cam Ward could be really good at the NFL level. He could also bust out very quickly.
It reminds me, not based on a little of the style of play, but, and I think I've mentioned this before, about the floor and the ceiling, as you're talking about, was Anthony Richardson. There was all kinds of talk with Anthony Richardson got drafted. It's like, man, that guy can't hit the broadside of a barn, but oh my God, look at that arm. And now we're seeing that fluctuation, right? There's games where you look at Anthony Richardson, you're like, wow, I get why the Colts drafted that guy. And there are games you go, what the hell was that?
I don't think he's this player. He's got some Caleb Williams to him, too, where he's just very lackadaisical in the pocket. And not necessarily in a bad way until it becomes a problem for him in the NFL, but he's just very comfortable. And I don't know. I think it could become a problem for him at the NFL level because things move so quickly, dude. It is crazy how fast everything moves once you get to the NFL level. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Last one here, Alex, from the 314. Believe it or not, there will be at least one team that scores 40 or more points this weekend in the NFL.
Oh, believe it. I think you'll see two, and I think it'll be the Lions and the Commanders.
In the same game?
In the same game. I think that's like a 43-40 final score.
I'll believe it. I think Commanders get there and they beat the Lions.
I'm going to believe it as well. I think it's in that game. I don't know what it's going to be.
God, he's frustrating me on my first day back.
Should have been your last two.
I'll go with the Commanders, man. I placed a bet on them on the money line.
Oh, well, okay, so
Me and
the Lions are
placed
winning.
a bet together. We've got the Commanders on the money line.
Why
So
would
put
you
all
bet
of your
that
money
with them?
Well, because I'm saying it with my chest. I think they're going to win.
Look who's with you.
I know. I didn't realize he was so on the fence about it anymore.
I've got the Commanders on the money line. I also have a fantasy pool that I've gone all in on the Commanders. I did that prior to the playoffs, and
oh yeah, I went all in on the Chiefs.
If they end up winning this game, I'm in a really good spot. So I'll go from a personal and professional side of things. It'd be good for me if the Commanders win. All right, he's Alex. That's T-Bone on BK. Coming up next, Jim Montgomery said something earlier today that spoke to our souls. We'll let you hear it next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here. The Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues back in action tonight as they host the Calgary Flames once again. Well, pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Carver for Puck Drop at 7. This portion update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Hey, coming up in the next segment, we're going to give you a chance to score a pair of tickets to see Chris Stapleton, so stay tuned for that. Also, next Sunday, January the 26th, hang out with the Fastlane and the Riz Show. Members of both shows will be there to watch the AFC and the NFC championship games, enjoy bucket specials, delicious foods, tons of TV to watch the games, giveaways, all kinds of stuff going on over at Hot Shots in Fenton next Sunday, January the 26th. They will also perform the Riz Show their Pick'em Challenge Punishment live on site, so be sure to go out there, hang out with them. All the details available for you at 101ESPN.com. All right, Alex, so earlier today, Jim Montgomery was talking to the assembled media, and he was asked about whether or not winning the other night should dictate them sticking with the same lineup in tonight's game against the Calgary Flames. Here's what he had to say.
No, our team is not at the level where we keep the same lineup. It's our lack of consistency when we have success is something that it's just going to be based on if guys are doing the right things out there and giving us a good opportunity at success. You played well, you're going to continue to play, win or lose.
I love that answer and the emphatic no at the beginning of it.
No.
I love it. First of all, he's thought about this, what that tells me of how quick he responded to the question. But second, that is the coach you need for this type of team. We were reading an article earlier today on The Athletic about the Washington Capitals and how they got out of this retool so quick. And a lot of the credit was to Spencer Carberry, who's taken over for that team and has been very decisive in what he does with the lines. What it has been, and I don't mean this to be disrespectful for Drew Bannister, but what it has been is, well, they played good, so let's keep these guys in the lineup and see if we can build a little bit with them. No, bleep that. Like, this team right now, if they have the mindset of like, hey, we need to win, I'm not going to give you brownies for playing well but not getting the results. I'm going to give the guys that do the performing of what I say we need, and they stay in the lineup. And if you don't provide it, then you come out of the lineup. What Jim Montgomery said going into that game Tuesday against Calgary about the third line, because it was Saad, Sundqvist, and Texier. And he said, we need a little sandpaper, but we need a lot of offensive zone time to set up our other team. BK, what happened in the third period to that third line?
Well, yesterday he was asked on the fast lane, hey, what do you think you guys could do better against Calgary in this upcoming game? Guess what he said?
What did he say?
More offensive zone time. And that's coming off of a game where he said the third line needs to provide that.
Yep, and what happened to that third line? They did not play for the final 11 minutes of that game. And guess who are going into the lineup now? One, Zach Bolduc, who's been good for you this season, but it's Nathan Walker. Nathan Walker has done every single thing that you can ask him this season to do, and that gets rewarded. This is the type of coaching that tells your team, I'm going to play the guys that I believe in, and those are the guys that are going to get the cupcake. So the next time a player goes in, like Matthew Joseph in Tuesday's game, when he goes in, he knows what the coach wants. And if I don't do what the coach wants, I'm coming out of the lineup, even if this team picks up a victory.
I appreciate that he's about the process, not just the results. And you guys know how much I've talked about that over the years. Sometimes, just because you win a game doesn't mean you're necessarily the better team. Now, you won that game, and that is hugely important. They don't ask how, they ask how many at the end of the season, right? So that is worth noting. However, if you play the exact same way the next game, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win again. Sometimes there is such thing as puck luck. And I didn't think the Blues were bad against Calgary the other night. I thought that was a hard-fought game on both sides, and it came down to a couple of bounces that went the Blues' way. I thought they played like a 50-50 proposition game. They earned that win. But there were some guys that did not play up to their expectations. And so when you have that type of a situation and you're doing some self-scouting and you're going up against the exact same team 2 nights later, and what is a game that could ultimately determine whether or not you get into the playoffs because of the 4-point swing, I love what Jim Montgomery said earlier today. And I don't just love what he said, I love that his actions are matching what his words are. And that it's been the same thing since the moment that he was hired. It's not as if expectations are changing on the fly for these guys. They know where they stand. And I think for a lot of players, that's really all they ask. It's not about am I in or am I out? It's about, do you explain to me why I'm in or out? When I'm in, do you tell me specifically what you need out of me? I'm sure there's a lot of people listening right now that have been in a work environment where you get to the end of the year and you have your year-end review, right? And you go to your boss and you sit down and they're like, hey, you did everything pretty well this year. Here's something that we would like to see more of next year. And what they say is something that you had no idea was even a part of your job description. And you're like, was I supposed to be doing that? Nobody had ever mentioned anything about that to me before. And it can be infuriating because you're being graded on something that you didn't even know was a part of what they were asking out of you. I think that happens at times in the NHL. And with Jim Montgomery, guys know where they stand and they know what their role is and they can fill that role accordingly. So I couldn't love what we heard earlier today enough.
This is how you instill that winning mindset into a group of players, because the one thing that can be very deflating is if you're trying to put together a win streak, you're trying to get into that winning mindset, but there are players in the lineup that you're like, does he give us our best chance to win? And I promise you, every single team asks that question of certain guys that are in the lineup. And when Nathan Walker comes out, I think a lot of guys in the Blues locker room are like, are we putting our best roster on the ice? Because Nathan Walker, even if he's not an offensive guy, he puts the team in a momentum position to gain it. And when he comes out of the lineup, he's going to be like, man, what's going on here? And when you get him back in, it's like, oh, okay, this makes sense. And Jim Montgomery just basically told the entire team, if you don't play how I feel you should play, you will be coming out of the lineup. And that perks everybody ears up. It would not surprise me. I'll make a bold prediction for you guys. Somebody on that third line scores tonight for the Blues. Either Walker, Sundqvist, or Matthew Joseph. Somebody is scoring. I'm sorry, Walker's on the fourth line. Joseph, Sundqvist, or Zach Bolduc. I'll even throw Nathan Walker in. Somebody is scoring out of those players.
Alex Ferrario will have your pregame coverage coming up at 6 o'clock. The puck drop, a big one for the Blues tonight at 7. It's all right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Coming up next, we're going to give you a chance to score a pair of tickets to see Chris Stapleton. That concert is coming up in July. We will give you a chance to score a pair of tickets coming up next as we put a bow on this thing with the BK and Ferrario Rewind here on 101 ESPN. Hey, if you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com or the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
That 101 ESPN app is presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. It is free to use. It is easy to enjoy, and it is super user-friendly. So be sure to download that today. If you haven't done so already, you can always check us out as well on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN. STL. That's where the graveyard chat is available. And after the podcast or after the show is completed, T-Bone goes back in and breaks everything down by the segments, makes it super easy for you to go through. If you're just a Blues fan, you want to see all the Blues segments, you can find exactly where they were and go exactly to that point.
Way to go,
show.
T-Bone.
So be sure to check that out again over on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. My father-in-law, for example, watches us now on YouTube at home. Just checks us out.
Yeah?
He puts it on the TV.
Hey.
That's how I watch at home as well. So if you've got a smart TV, just go over to the YouTube and put us in over there.
My daughter was watching us at lunchtime.
In just a couple of minutes, we'll give you a chance to score a pair of tickets to see Chris Stapleton on Friday, July 11th at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. Tickets for Chris Stapleton go on sale on Friday at 10 a.m. Text in coming up here in just a little bit, though. Keep this close to you, 314-399-9646. That's the Air Comfort Service text line. We'll give you a chance to score those Chris Stapleton tickets here in just a moment. All right, Alex, Blues back in action tonight. We went through the math earlier today. They've got to go on quite the run. They've got to do something like 22-11-4 in their next 37 games. They need 48 points or so to get to that 94-point threshold, which feels about where they need to be. This is a huge one. It's a 4-point swing between them and Calgary. What are you looking for?
I'm going to say that the third period is going to be the most important period for me tonight.
I'm going to agree with that, Alex, because that's where the game is dictated. Sorry, I didn't mean to be a jerk there.
I can't even say the words that I'm thinking of.
I was going to give reasoning behind it, but you know what? I don't even want to anymore.
You know what? Why don't you tell me? I think
T-Bone,
you're.
yeah.
I'm with you.
T-Bone, let me. No. You shut your damn mouth over there, Kadarius. You shut your damn mouth. Let me explain to you why I said that, T-Bone. Right. Most people like to say that the first period's the most important period to try and get off to a fast start. You want to know why I think the third period's most important?
Why?
It's because the Blues, if they are either leading or trailing, have to go out there and eliminate Calgary's momentum. They have to. You have to win it in regulation.
I think all three periods are the most important.
Shut the hell up!
And I think the key to the game is actually to outscore the opposition tonight.
All right, I'm out.
I know you're going to say goaltending. That's what I thought his answer was going to be.
I'm out.
What's your prediction, Alex?
Shut up, man. I'm not doing this anymore.
I'll bite. I am fearful. A little hot take here to end the show. Why not? I'm fearful that the goaltending decision is the costly one tonight. I think Hofer does not.
Calgary going to Dustin
Blues.
Wolf over
No,
Dan Vladar.
I worry about the Blues showing up in this game and Hofer being in between the pipes. So I'm going to say Flames win this one in regulation.
3-2 final score Blues.
Ooh!
In regulation.
With 2 third-period goals.
I hate both of you, actually, because there was a little sarcasm with that freaking wink.
I know.
There was a little sarcasm with that stupid wink of yours.
I was trying to play into your answer.
4-3.
All in the first period.
Calgary wins in overtime because the Blues don't have the third period that Alex is looking for. It's my fear. That is my fear is they go out there, they have a good game, and then they don't finish it out. It seems like that's kind of been the theme of the season thus far, that they have moments where they look really good and they just can't quite capitalize all the way.
All right.
That's my fear for
You
the
know
Blues
what?
tonight.
This has been a fun week, but I think I'm going to have to shut it down for Friday. Thursday will be it for me.
We will talk to you guys tomorrow.
You two will talk to you guys tomorrow.
From the Centene Community Ice Center, where we are expected to be joined by Mike McKenna, former NHL goalie. So if the Blues have great or bad goaltending tonight, we'll be able to break it all down with Mike McKenna tomorrow. Right now is your chance to score a pair of tickets to see Chris Stapleton Friday, July 11th at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. If you have the correct answer to the following question, your texter number 101, you are getting that pair of tickets. Earlier today, Alex mentioned they had an experience last night with one of their daughters. What happened? What was it that they experienced last night? If you are the correct answer, and texter number 101, you are getting that pair of tickets to see Chris Stapleton on July 11th. For Alex, who's going to be back here tomorrow, and T-Bone, I'm BK. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. Fastlane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Do the Cardinals have anybody else that, as of today, you would project to be top 7 to 10 at their position for the 2025 season?
No.